So I'm gonna get back hosting, Emily,
Okay.
and then in the top left you can see where it says live on YouTube.
I do see that. Hello, YouTube.
There is no one watching yet. Good.
Hello, no one.
So then you can click the view stream on YouTube, and then at the end of the review, before you click leave, just click end live stream.
Let's see. Stop live stream. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
I can do that. And then when we go on like a 5-minute bathroom break, should I just keep it rolling?
Yeah, that would be probably the best. Maybe just turn your video off. Okay. And that should be good.
We can do that. Anything else I need to know? Let's see.
No, it's pretty much it. It should be really straightforward.
Great. I'm gonna change my sharing stuff so that these guys can share their bits and pieces. Okay. Great.
All right. See you later.
Have fun on the other review. And when it's all said and done, do we post the recording? So like if I want to see what you guys have been up to or what Adam Studio has been up to, will I be able to?
Yeah, it should be public on YouTube. If it's not, we'll be sending like the little private links out to the faculty.
Awesome. That's exciting. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
You guys jumping in? Are you guys feeling like you got some rest and coffee in you?
Check.
Excellent. Rest, coffee, and holiday haircuts. For the lack
We're all
thereof.
in the other meeting.
Should I be wearing my coveralls?
That was an option for folks who wanted to.
Oh yeah, I have my coveralls. I don't feel like changing now.
Oh my. Hey, while we're waiting, Jackie threw out the idea that maybe for that little opening event, the people, if anyone's in town and wants to meet up in the parking lot, we could just like have a partially in person, partially on Zoom thing. And so we haven't made any final decisions, but if y'all are interested in that, then that's something we're playing with as an idea. Like masks required and all, but something outside, low risk. That
I'd be interested.
Kick the tires, so to speak. I'll have to make sure that is up to snuff with two-lane protocol, but we will see. Lizzie sharing the link to this. Thanks, Lizzie.
I was a little too confident in just clicking on the old Zoom link for some reason.
I think this meeting has a new Zoom link, but whenever we do the opening, we're just gonna use the studio link to make it easy for everyone. This isn't the regular studio link we're on right now, right? No. Bhumika, how are you doing? It's late night there, huh?
Good, yeah. I was very jet lagged, so I accidentally fell asleep in the evening and I had a dream about all of us having a review in person. For some reason.
That's the worst.
And Danielle, I like the group shot. Thanks for throwing everybody in there.
Don't look too close.
It's pretty good.
I tried.
I think you did some good photoshopping there. So Brian Lee just texted me. He is going to be a few minutes late because they have a staff meeting, but he'll jump on right after that. But also he knows the project from being in on the mid-review, so that's okay. He'll know how to jump right in. Hey, I'm going to ask the reviewers to each say a little something about themselves. Do you all want me to like have y'all do the same for like introduce yourselves, or do you want to do it as you go, like as you're speaking? Like, hey, I'm Danelle, blah, 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 blah.
I would do it at the beginning if you have us do it, because I feel like the longer we go, the more we're going to forget.
True. I guess the other issue is just finding some order in the chaos of trying to introduce yourselves in this non-hierarchical format. Youngest to oldest, it'll be even more chaotic.
Oh God, that would out me. I'm the oldest.
I think Nick and I are, gotcha.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I kind of feel okay not doing formal introductions, given that we all have little name tags on our screens and we're all students in the studio, but I don't know if other people want to introduce a little more formally.
What do you think? There's a proposal on the table to skip over the quick intros.
I think introducing ourselves and then talking for like 2 or 3 hours, I don't think they'd remember it by the end of it. You know what I mean? Maybe that's just me.
I agree.
That's why we have our name tags.
Yeah, and that's why we have our name tag.
I hear you voting yes to James's proposal. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Me too.
I second.
Okay. Any dissenters in the group? Okay. You will be the nameless coveralled masses.
Yes.
There's Claire, the file cruncher.
I got Claire, our
Oh,
queen.
Claire.
Okay, quick question. Claire, do you have decent internet stability?
Yes.
Okay.
Whoa.
Let us know so one of us can be presentation backup. I guess Zach,
Okay.
are you good for backup if needed?
Yeah, Claire,
Yeah,
if you
I
want
just
to,
don't know how.
if
I
you want to
don't
send
know
me
how
the
you're
file.
gonna get the file. Okay. It might take like some time to upload, so I will start it now.
What about
I'm just gonna
FileZilla?
upload it to the drive.
Unless that really gums up your internet.
I don't want to get on the VPN because I'm worried it's gonna mess up my connection.
Okay. I feel like
but I will try it on the drive.
Okay. Well, be
And
careful.
I've exited out of everything else on my computer. Just plugged in.
Good morning, you guys. I'm so happy to see you.
Have you seen any final images of the carts yet, Jackie?
I haven't seen anything.
Ooh, she's in for a treat.
I've intentionally
That's
held
the way we like it.
photos, so it'll be a surprise.
Yeah, and can we coordinate? Good morning, Anne.
Good morning. Sorry. Ooh.
It's okay. It's okay. Just cover your ears for a sec. Apothecrew, should we is on Friday, everybody's gonna wear their jumpsuit, right?
For the reveal party. Gender reveal.
Oh, look at James' hair. Hey,
Got a haircut.
let me see. Give me one of these. Wow. So cool. So cool. Okay, yeah. So for Friday, we wear our jumpsuits, whether we're IRL or in Zoom. Yes?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Because I wasn't sure if I should wear it today. And then I was like, oh, it's so cold. I'm just going to have like 30 layers underneath. So it's Friday.
Sounds like a plan.
Great. I'm going to mute.
Hey, Ben and Edson, welcome, welcome. We're waiting for a few more people to hop on. And Brian Lee just texted. He's going to be a couple minutes late because they're wrapping up a staff meeting. But I was telling my crew earlier, since he was on our mid-review, I don't think he'll just be able to jump right in and kind of know the backstory or the mid story. Who else? Jackie, we've got Anna joining us too. And oh, Mike just jumped in. I don't think Anna's here yet. And Jen. So I think we're just waiting for Anna and Jen before we get rolling.
Jen might not make it. She and I were texting the other day. She said she might be able to pop in and out, but I don't think we should wait for her. There's Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hey, Jackie.
Welcome, Mike.
Yeah, I think Jen. Oh, hi, Mike. Oh, it's so nice. Jen will be in and out. I think she might be packing up her stuff to come down to be here Friday.
Great. Well, then I think we have a critical mass, and I might kick us off with some introductions and stuff. Does that work for you all? Great. So let's see. I just want to start at first by thanking you all for being here, especially our esteemed critics. Thanks for joining us today. I know it's been like an oddball semester with a lot of Zooming, and the last thing anyone wants is to be on Zoom even more. But this is a great moment for us to be able to share the work, get your feedback and critical eye on the work we've been doing. And this also is a nice moment of closure for us for this semester, and a bit of a hopefully a really robust conversation and something like a celebration or ending moment for us. Let's see. I do want to mention that today we're going to be talking about the project. I'm gonna talk right now and then try to hand this over to the students and not get in the way. But I do want to mention that we have a main project we've been working on, a design build project, but we'll also show you some additional design pieces that we've kind of built into the semester. And in part, our design build project this year was intentionally small because there was enough uncertainty with the semester that we weren't sure if we'd go into total lockdown, and we didn't want to be in the middle of a massive building and have to contend with all of that. And so you're going to see that the topic and conversations and the process we've gone through is very typical of a small center project, and is not, by no means is the conversation or the topic small. It's quite big, but our built intervention is intentionally a little smaller than normal. But that's given us the ability to do some additional things in the process too. So we're excited to share that. And for today, we'll start with that main project and then conclude with some of the additional pieces. And we'll have a few breaks along the way where we can have some conversation. But at the same time, I think the spirit of this is conversational in tone. So if you have questions as we're going, please feel free to stop, ask what you want to ask, say what you want to say. Don't be afraid to interrupt or jump in or whatever, because this very much is meant to be an open conversation and a little relaxed in its nature. What else? I think that I'm supposed to say that this project was funded by Johnson Controls. It's a part of our annual request for proposals process. And so I just want to make sure to say that out loud. There's external funding that we've been able to utilize to make this project happen. And with that, I'm going to do what I said and get out of the way. And first, I would love it if our critics could just say their name and anything you want to say about yourself, maybe like where you're coming from or whatever you think is useful. So I'll start that off. I'll buy you guys a moment of time by saying my name's Emily, and I've had the honor of teaching these guys this semester, along with my colleagues at the Small Center. And yeah, maybe Anna, are you up for going next?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm excited to see what y'all have been working on this past semester, this crazy pandemic semester. I'm Anna Krogart. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and my work sits at kind of the intersections of gender, migration, performance, and inequality. I've done field work in Chicago and Bosnia-Herzegovina, and more recently in New Orleans, where I was living until very recently. So I spent the past 8 years of my life living and teaching in New Orleans. I'm now at the Nagami Integrative Research Institute at the Field Museum in Chicago as of this year. But while I was in New Orleans, I got to know Jackie's project really intimately. And I've written about it and been pretty involved since 2017. So I'm really excited to see this next iteration of the project and to get to talk it through with all of you today.
Mike, are you up for going next?
Absolutely. My name is Michael Dalimole. I am a co-founder of Goodwood NOLA, a design build firm here in New Orleans. Also a friend of Jackie's and a supporter of Solitary Gardens and this project in general. I have done about 250-ish commercial design build projects in New Orleans. And this is kind of a new thing for me, and I'm very excited to see the progress. I got to come in and see the early stages of the build, and it was really impressive and fun and intentional. So I'm really looking forward to seeing these end results.
Excellent. Edson, how about you?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Edson Cabalfin. I'm the newly appointed director of the Social Innovation and Social Entrepreneurship Program in the School of Architecture at Tulane University. I was at the University of Cincinnati before, and I just moved to New Orleans a week ago. So, so this is really new for me, but I'm an architect, I'm a historian, and I've also been involved in several social innovation projects in Southeast Asia, in Tanzania. And so I'm really excited to see the work of the students. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Ben, how about you? Are you up for going next?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. A lot of familiar faces here. I'm Ben Smith. I'm an assistant professor here at Tulane. I also direct the graduate program and coordinate graduate thesis. Trying to finish a book that's been taking way too long, but working on that. My background is in design and history and theory. I've worked professionally as a designer as well as an historian, so kind of wear a lot of different hats. So it depends on who you ask what I am. Oftentimes I just say I'm a design theorist. Yeah, looking forward to it, and I can't wait to see the work.
Awesome. Anne.
You'd think by now I'd have the mute and unmute down, but it's great to see everyone's face. And most of you know me as the director of the Small Center. And I feel like this year I have gotten to know you by your name and popped in and out, but not nearly as much as normal, just because we've been trying to, you know, abide to the reality of keeping less people in the center as much as possible. And when you're all there, we want you to be there. So it's just great to see everyone, and I can't wait to see what the final products, sort of final designs look like. And really my work has always been at these intersections of environment, health, and now design, but just in general, it's all these intersections. And I feel like this project represents those intersections in so many ways. And so, I'll leave it at that and turn it over to whoever is taking the lead. Emily, are you saying, wait, is that all the, I don't know, did you want Jackie to go? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, sure. Jackie, how about Jackie, Jose, and Nick? Do you want to say some hellos?
At the same time, do you guys want to try to harmonize?
That'd be great.
I'm Jackie. This is Queenie, who just jumped on the couch. I don't have all the words yet. I just am so excited and honored, and as many of you know, both personally and you know, at the early check-in stages of this project, this year was difficult for all of us, and particularly difficult for my household. And being with all of y'all was really just such a huge force of life and hope and joy for me. And so even beyond what we created together, what you gifted me was tremendous. So I'm so grateful to everyone for that.
How's it going, y'all? My name is Jose Cado. I'm one of the team members at the Small Center. Also a Tulane alum, and did several design builds with the Small Center when I was a student there as well. So I'm excited to see what you all have been doing, and it was fun to get out last week and actually see the projects in motion and document them. And yeah, it was just great. I'm excited to hear what y'all have to say about them and see where the conversation goes.
Hey everyone, Nick Jenish. Yeah, just excited on behalf of the Small Center team to be one of the folks supporting this project. It's been great to see you guys have fought through the adversity of the weirdness of this semester and this time. So excited to see the work. We've seen it all the way along, and happy to see it at its final stage.
Can I say one more thing, Emily?
Sure.
I just want to say, like, reiterate what Nick said is just, you know, we just know how hard this semester has been. And I think you all should take like real pride in like what you've accomplished and like know, I don't know. I think that's something to just like really hold on to and know that we respect and honor all the work that you've put in to make this happen in what has been a really, really, really challenging time. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Excellent. So Brian Lee is going to join us as well in a couple minutes. We may pause when he comes in to let him introduce himself. But other than that, I think we can get rolling. And I believe Danielle is going to kick us off with the project intro. Claire, I've got screen sharing set up, so you should be good.
Can y'all see my screen?
We can.
We can see it. We can also see your toolbars. I don't know if there's a way to full screen it or not.
You can see what?
The toolbars up top and on the side. I don't know if there's a way to go.
Oh.
Yeah.
I went full screen. Oh, did it? It just has a lag. Okay. Noted.
Gotta love technology. Well, I'm gonna kick us off. My name is Danielle. We debated on whether or not we're gonna do intros, but that's a typical greeting. So hello, my name is Danielle. And I just wanted to introduce you guys. A couple of you are familiar with the project and a couple of you aren't. So we are partnered with Jackie, who is the founder of Solitary Gardens. And Solitary Gardens is this conversation and intersection between prison abolition and understanding the impacts and effects of incarceration and trying to understand and educate the community of that. So what she does is she takes garden plots that are the same size as cell blocks and then tries to introduce and educate people through that. And she's traveled all over the country doing this. And the inception date was in 2015. There are several different locations around the United States. And from this, she's offshooted into a couple of different programs, including the Garrison, which is like a traveling plant ambulance, which it's a big truck that's been retrofitted, and it goes around and it helps to seed these gardens in a couple of different places. And these gardens are the product of incarcerated folks who design the gardens through letters while they're in their incarceration period in prisons around the country, and then they have volunteers who plant these gardens in real life. So through that, she's got the garrison, she's got the prisoners apothecary, which is the one that we worked the most closely with. And she's also got flowers for incarcerated mothers. These are just a couple of the different programs.
Apparently our file is a little bit large, y'all.
We're gonna have to figure out a game to play during the lag time. We just have way too much information to share.
Is the next file location, Danielle? Or the next slide?
I believe so.
Because it's already changed for me, so I'm concerned if it hasn't changed for you guys.
It has, oh, there.
There we go. Hello. So to understand and orient us a little bit, because I know not everyone is super familiar with New Orleans, Tulane School of Architecture, the main branch is located in Uptown, and you can see on the map there. But we were working out of the Tulane Small Center, which is in Central City, as you can also see. And these the potential project that we're working with is going to be housed at Resurrection After Exoneration, which is, we affectionately call it RAY. And we, as part of this project, we're looking to retrofit this space so that it could serve as both the house for the carts and potentially use the prisoner's apothecary, which produces apothecary medicine from the solitary gardens, and sell that or make teas with that, etc. And then the Solitary Gardens location, which is in the 9th Ward, this is I would say, the flagship location for New Orleans, is on Andrew Street in the 9th Ward. So just to kind of understand all of the different important sites throughout the progress of the project, Tulane School of Architecture was most important to us because this is where we did some of the milling of the pieces, but the majority of the construction was in the small center. Aha, here we go. To give a little bit more background about the prisoner's apothecary, which is the one that we were working, again, the most closely with. The prisoner's apothecary is basically the apothecary medicine that is designed by those same incarcerated folks within the prisons. So the people in the prisons get the chance to design and have something beyond themselves, beyond the walls of their cell. And then they also get the chance to imagine tinctures, teas, salves, all of these different things, and put those forth as an opportunity to heal the community that they are accused of having perpetrated against. So that's the part that we were working with, trying to understand how we're going to use this to further that message in the community. But this is also in partnership with the Samara School of Community Herbalism, which is the one who will teach people how to create these tinctures and help educate people on how this apothecary medicine can be of the most benefit to them.
Whoever's like when you're talking, if you just want to give me like a little wave when you're like, I can see all of you, when you're like reaching the end of your slide, I'll hit it so that we don't have to wait in silence.
Cool. That sounds like a good plan. All right, project mission. So understanding all of these things that we do, it's a little bit of a complicated web that we're dealing with. So if you want to break it down to its most basic components, understanding that Jackie was initially inspired by Herman Wallace, an incarcerated individual in the Angola prison. And Jackie then idealized the solitary gardens, which is what we've been talking about, those garden beds that are designed by the incarcerated folks. The two-lane small center is kind of an intersection between the Solitary Gardens and the other visions that she has had. And she came up with the idea of the Apothecart. We call it the Apothecart because it's an apothecary and then a cart. And it also switches out with an apothecary, apothecafe, a couple of different options that we were playing with. So the goals of the project were to create these mobile healing units for this Prisoners Apothecary branch of Solitary Gardens, and then envision that home that I talked about at Ray for the future of these carts. And the biggest questions that we were trying to understand is how can we use these carts not only as something to produce, sell, and promote these apothecary medications, but how can we inform the public about where these tinctures and all of these medications are initially coming from, and then potentially get them involved at a deeper level. So we then set out on our mission to understand how we can design these mobile carts to produce and sell this, not even sell, but to provide apothecary medicine to the community. Sorry, I forgot to wave.
It's all good. I already clicked.
I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did for the first part of the semester and sort of the grounding work to get us ready to do this design build. Our semester was sort of front loaded on getting up to speed and educating ourselves on the topics we're working with. So the first one, or the first theme that Danielle just mentioned, is sort of design and justice and the interplays between those two. So we had a lot of readings about sort of the potential for design to inform justice or otherwise not maintain systems, which we sort of were tasked with reinterpreting in read and sketch assignments. And we also had a couple of teach-ins, one by Jackie, who gave us a talk about her art and advocacy and also abolitionist principles, and then another by Andrea Armstrong, a Loyola professor who works with incarcerated individuals and prison and jail conditions.
Maybe we could all do like dance moves when we're waiting for the slides, and that's like part of like when there's just the silent thing.
I have this massive upload going on in the background because we're trying to upload a backup version of the presentation just in case. I'm just going to go ahead and cancel that upload because I think it's really going to help the lag. So just give me 1 second, guys.
It sounds like a good one.
Claire, I'm going to hit the little one of the little emoji buttons so it flashes for your cue for next slide. I don't know if my video is coming through.
Claire, I support you stopping the Google upload.
This is all part of illustrating the trials of the semester.
All right, can you all see that?
We're getting there, not yet. There we go.
Okay.
I think this is going to be better. Thanks for.
Is this the correct slide, James?
Yeah, this is it. So also pretty early on, we knew we were doing mobile projects in the form of some cart, but we didn't really know what the size or scale of that looked like. But we still went out to potential sites where these things might be housed or where they might sort of visit and be used by Jackie and the team, all of which are shown here. One is Resurrection After Exoneration, which Danielle just mentioned, and then also Promise of Justice Initiative and the sort of I-10 overpass at the Greenway intersection to get a sense for where these things might end up living for a bit. And then we also took a little field trip to a lot of past small center projects and design builds that other teams have done in New Orleans. I think to help us get a sense for scale and scope of these projects, and also to see where ours fit in, which is on the tinier and more fiddly end of that, and also the more mobile end. But this is good to help us just get started thinking about the actual process of design build, and then Emily also had helpful tidbits of what not to do at each project. And then another formative field trip we had was we actually went out to the gardens, which Jackie runs there in the Lower Ninth neighborhood. And we got to spend a day out here sort of touring them and seeing like what this project actually looks like, and what, you know, the day-to-day actions of the gardens are. So then we all took a turn participating in the process that is used to build these garden beds, which is it's on the next slide, so we'll all see it soon. But you sort of mix what Jackie calls revolutionary mortar, and then you pack it into these 6x9 cells, sort of mimicking beds as the homage to the cells. There we go. I think you can click again, Claire.
Are you guys seeing the form work? You want me to click in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, thanks, James. Hi, my name is Lizzie. And starting off the semester, after we laid the groundwork for really understanding what solitary gardens and Jackie and you know, larger issues of prison abolition are all about, we decided to really delve into the carts. So our first questions were kind of, what will the cart look like? What's the scale? And how many are we going to have? So we started off with some precedent research. We looked at everything from traditional apothecaries from the medieval times to New Orleans typologies like the Roman chewing candy carts, older ice cream carts, things like hot dog carts, and then everything from vendor carts to different art projects and also advocacy work around prison abolition and different art pieces too. So our next questions then were, what will the cart look like? And what is the scale going to be specifically? So for configuration, we started off, you know, maybe it's a lot of small pieces that get built together once they're deployed on site. Maybe it's a smaller cart that's more horizontal, like the ice cream vendor carts that we saw. Maybe it's slightly larger, you know, enough room for a canopy or something like that. We were playing with the idea of a wardrobe, playing on the traditional apothecary, and then maybe it was even large enough for us to inhabit and stand under. Next, it was transportation. So, you know, we've determined the size, what is it, how is it going to be moved? Because mobility was a very essential part of this project. It could be the size of a wheelbarrow that's easily pushed, and maybe, you know, a wheelbarrow doesn't move as far as something that a bike would, but maybe it's pushed, maybe it's biked, maybe it's pulled by the garrison, which is the plambulance that Solitary Gardens uses. Maybe it's flat packed in a truck. And then even further from there, what will the kind of main programmatic pieces be? We've identified conversation, transformation, aggregation, storage/display, and advocacy and action as our primary focuses for the cart. And moving forward, we decided to narrow this down a little bit to try and make some decisions. Sorry, I forgot to flash my emoji a little late. So round one, we had early design ideas. We split up into teams of two, just exploring those different scales. So you can see the small cart, we had two options, one a little bit referencing the ice cream cart, except it was a front-loaded bike at the same time. And then we also have larger cart designs, thinking about, what would this look like if it were more vertical? What would it look like if it was actually more like not necessarily a service, but a pedicab, where you could travel and conversate at the same time instead of, having it just be travel to the spot and then conversate. And then what would it look like if we were to inhabit the different spaces? I think all of these had different implications as to, where they would be stored and how easily they could be deployed. So we settled on the scale of a push and bike, which is in between small and large, I would say, and really focused on conversation, transformation, and storage and display as the main things moving forward. Advocacy and action, we still talked a lot about during the semester, but it actually manifested itself in infographics that we'll be talking about later. So our second round, which I think some of you reviewers were here for, we were discussing storage, hardware, materials, and branding for the cart. So for storage, we determined that the more flexibility we had, the better. I think that we started off with a super detailed system, like a special storage for tinctures, a special storage for salves and jars, but we eventually landed on modules that could be interchangeable. We'll talk more in detail about that later on in the presentation. And then for materials, we decided to use aluminum, wood, and skate-light. So aluminum, we were thinking is going to be wrapping the skin of it. It's extremely lightweight. It's also durable. And we knew that we had the opportunity to be able to mill it, which was exciting for us. Wood, we used marine grade plywood for kind of like the interior of the cart, building out some of the walls. And then skate-light was chosen actually as a surprisingly sustainable product that would act as our countertop surfaces. Because of certain chemicals, or not even chemicals, but just products that are used when cutting up different mixtures for the herbal medicine, we didn't want the wood that would become like too stained over time, or that would be really hard to clean. So skate-light was a surprising discovery that we made. And then we also talked about branding materials, one of which was a logo. We also discussed colors and fonts and different types of infographics here, but I pulled out the logo to speak on that a little bit. It's a flower breaking free from a cell, and it's supposed to represent perseverance and growth. And then we also have the words apothecart, apothecafe, and apothecary that are a little bit interchangeable. My bad, I forgot to react again. So then we moved into what I've called round three, where we had that review determining all of the materials and the types of storage. And we did a really quick charrette one day. We broke up into teams of two, and we built out these cardboard mock-ups. We had several different ideas. You can see Dana presenting one of them, what would become Camelback and Armadillo, as we've nicknamed them. The Camelback was born from this picture that you see James sitting in the center middle, and it's the largest cart. It actually goes a little bit more vertical than, yeah. It actually goes a little bit more vertical than the other cart. So here is our presentation of Armadillo. We call it Armadillo because it's a little bit more inwardly focused with more of a shell on the outside, and the program kind of like sits in the belly of the cart. So we investigated 2 schemes for armadillo, one with rounded edges and one with occupying the maximum amount of space on the trailer bed, both having floating shelves up front and a larger unprogrammed storage space in the rear. And we mocked up the rounded edges iteration for Jackie to see. And then this is Camelback. You can probably see why we call it that. It's taller and expands with the opening of the wings. And the idea was to build in a consultation space with a sense of privacy. One of the things that does happen at these carts once they're deployed is consultations. So somebody would approach the cart and talk to an herbalist about, not only their ailments, but kind of like their larger place where they are in life, and kind of talk about herbal medicine as a way not only to heal their physical pains, but also any other things that are kind of maybe causing that in their life. So anyways, it was important for us to include that space. And Camelback also adapted over time to include the module storage in the middle, just like Armadillo. Instead of open space and storage in the back, this cart has 6 drawers in the front. So it has more program storage, and then a larger storage slot in the bottom accessed from the back. And as you can see from these drawings, the wings open up to where they kind of have like a screen from the back.
Can we pause for 1 minute? I think Jeremy's about to talk. Is that right? Just so that we're not like marching through relentlessly, I wanted to have a brief moment before we get into some of the particulars and details to see if any of our review team has any questions or needs clarification or any comments that they would like to say. It's okay if we don't.
Nothing on my end.
Hold on 1 second. Brian just jumped in. Hey, Brian.
Hey, what's going on?
Thanks for joining in. I know you saw a lot of this, a lot of work up to this point, but I wanted to give you a moment if you want to just say hello and where you're coming from.
Oh, hey, everybody. Brian Lee, co-locate design here in New Orleans. Run a design justice practice. Most of you have met me before, or we've worked together in some capacity. So love you all, and looking forward to seeing how everything works out.
Awesome.
Emily, I have a question. Is it okay to start a conversation? Just a second. Okay, so one of the questions I have is, you all talked about how you got grounded in kind of the information and background on abolition and the prisons, the prison system, and all of Jackie's work, and among others' work, and how did that kind of inform the design where you are, like the design, not the end result, but this middle process, right? Like you talked about that background information, but how did that inform as you were moving through the process? The logo made sense to me, like the logo was very articulated, but I'd be intrigued as you were making decisions, how that was informing those decisions, even though we're not to individual choices, like in terms of specifics quite yet. I'm going to now be quiet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can try and answer that. I think, this like advocacy and action component that Lizzie mentioned earlier was constantly in the forefront of our brains. Like, yes, we want to give Jackie her dream cart and, help facilitate her message. But I think we also thought about like, okay, how can we also get involved in, prison abolition and educating people and introducing people to the idea. And we go, and my team, we have like different teams. My team goes into that a little bit. So not to give any spoilers, but we ended up having a little add-on to the cart that's kind of our nod to adding to this advocacy action component that was super important to us to bring to the cart. And you see that in some of the design decisions of the cart, and that's kind of getting into the nitty gritty detail components that we talk a little about later.
Can I segue from that, you guys? Sorry, Lizzie.
No, you go.
Just that I think Anne brings up a really important part, and I'm also curious if any of the seeds of abolition that I hopefully planted changed any of the ways that you personally interacted with each other. It's just a question, if there was any shifts in sort of like, because I understand what Emily and Nick are facilitating is a collaborative process, but that we're still human, and sometimes there's conflict within that, micro and macro. And if maybe to answer towards the end, if any of the ideas that abolition begins with eye contact and the intimate ways that we are working with each other shifted throughout the process of this project. Yeah.
I think we definitely had to get uncomfortable with each other. This isn't a light or easy topic. And luckily, we have had so much fun, working on this with each other and interacting with each other and engaging with each other. And Emily has definitely helped facilitate us to, answer the hard questions. We were reading a little bit of a book about, solitary confinement, and it's all very, difficult and heavy. But I think because we all got along so well in a weird, obviously wonderful way, it was kind of easy and enjoyable. And I think, we left this feeling really good about what we did and what we learned along the way. And I think you definitely helped facilitate that, Jackie, with you coming in and talking with us and all that kind of stuff.
I don't mean to be the stereotypical architecture student in saying this, but I also think that to kind of answer both of those questions, hopefully at once, our conversations about design started to change, and design is so integral as what we do in this stage of our life right now, and how we think about it and the way that we process it. And I don't want to speak for my fellow students, but I know that I have never had to have conversations about the humanity of something that I'm touching. And that was something that I think became very important to us in terms of this section of the cart is a right angle versus the curve that we ended up going with. How does that translate across the humanity and the tactile ability of a cart? This part starts to look like it would be, instead of a freeing moment, a confining moment. How can we use this storage or this as display? How can we use this part of the cart to tell a story or to engage and bring forth questions from people who may not know the entire purpose of the cart? I think that was the biggest difference for me in general. And logistically it manifested in, the curves of the cart, the handles on the cart, the boxes in the cart. And we go into that a little bit more later, but just as kind of something to food for thought. But yeah, just the conversations between us started to change.
I do have a couple of questions, but I think they might also be better for when we move through more material.
Sure. Yeah, we can wait, but if anybody else has anything they want to ask or say, feel free to. All right. If not, then I believe Jeremy's going to take over next.
Yeah. That was a perfect segue, Danielle. Thank you. So in addition to the actual studio class and the project of designing the carts, we also had a fabrication class that enhanced our skills in woodworking and casting and milling that would ultimately lead to the final project. And within that, there was a lot of beautiful failures where we did a lot of iterations of different prototypes, which led us to figure out what was the best move and what didn't really work, as in all design process. And so most importantly, Lizzie talked about a lot, was this idea of modularity and this motif of transformers that Jackie brought up from the beginning. And so we were really thinking about what's going to go in the cart and how is the storage like related to it and not just holding stuff. And so we explored different materials, different shapes, different opacities. And so you can see the top 5 boxes are just different iterations of what it could possibly be. And then the second set of 5 pictures really exemplifies this idea of transformation and opportunity within the storage to kind of figure out what's all going to go in. And within these carts, there's like a lot of tinctures and glass and bottles and balms and salves and a lot of different shapes. So we were thinking about how could we make something standard meet so many different options. Which I think was very nice in working with this project.
Nice time filler.
And so in addition to the boxes, a big part of the carts was creating space for conversation and consultation. And so to kind of aid in that, we figured we would need some type of seating. And so there was a lot of iterations of like different types of flat pack seating or some like guerrilla construction types of seats to figure out what would be the best option. And ultimately, we thought just like a small foldable chair, like you see the one on the right, would be good. But these designs were very fun and very engaging to think about what a chair could be and what seating could be within this like mobile space. And lastly, we're thinking of the tactility and of the carts. And so a lot of the stuff that went in was the handles. And so we were thinking about maybe casting or 3D printing. As you can see, there's one made from resin with plants put inside. And so we were looking at a lot of the aesthetics of what these handles would look like, as well as the feeling of it as well. And we're really thinking about engaging every type of user. So someone that might not be able to have as much fine motor skills, or someone that maybe couldn't even open it at all. We were just trying to figure out what's the most universal way to have access to these carts. So these were very fun in kind of voting. There was a lot of confusion and fights.
And I'll pause right there before Zach and Claire take over and say that one of the themes I think Jeremy mentioned was beautiful failures. And I think we tried to make a lot of mistakes early and often so that we could get to a point where we had some more proficiency in like intuitive abilities with things like chairs and handles. And these guys have done a great job of failing a lot and learning from it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in the best way possible, like learning from the mistakes that we make and making the next thing better. All right, go for it.
All right, Emily, would you mind just raising your hand when the slide changes for you, because it changes much earlier for me. Cool. Okay. Wait, I can't hear you, Emily. Is that okay?
Yes, I'll do that.
All right, great, thank you. All right, so Zach and I are gonna talk about and show some of the final presentation drawings, some of the images that we created to communicate these carts and their differences and their assembly and their functions, and just some attempts we made to really represent them in the best way that we could. So starting out here, we have some axons that show the transit and the deployed mode of each of the carts. So we're starting with the camelback cart here. Like we said, just to reiterate, there's the camelback cart and the armadillo cart. Those were names that we kind of developed for them early on in the process and then decided to keep. Because that's just genuinely how we were referring to them throughout the entire process. So we're looking at the camelback cart here, and on the left is how it is in transit, which means how it is all closed up and secured when it's being dragged by the bike. And on the right here, you can see how it is when it's deployed. So this is when it's either detached from the bike or can be left on the bike and is being used to help people. And you can see the same here with the armadillo cart. It's a little more compact. I think that Lizzie mentioned that the camelback is a little bit larger than the armadillo cart, but you can see the storage and also this removable powder-coated table that we have that comes off the side of the cart and makes it functional. So this is the transit and the deployed of the armadillo cart. All right. And then lastly, we have an exploded view of all of the moving parts on both carts. So great. So on the armadillo cart, on the left here, you can see that the table is removed. All of those boxes come out as well. Those storage boxes, they're the same storage boxes that are on both carts. They're just turned in a different orientation. There's some pretty significant rear storage in the armadillo. We've got this little drawer. And then on the right here, the only one thing I will amend is that this top aluminum part does not come off of the camelback. It's just lifted up so that you can see the shelves underneath. So that's not operable. But everything else on here that you can see is in fact operable. The drawers, all of the storage. So, I mean, adaptability and flexibility was a huge, huge theme in the design of these carts. So that's something that we wanted to represent. All right. And then coming up next, excellent, we have some some unfolded orthographic projections of both of the carts, so you guys can understand really kind of like a 360 view of how these carts exist in space. And in the center, you can see how the cart is activated. So here is illustrated a consultation moment, which is part of what those blinders, or we call them, wings, are used for on the camelback cart, is to create privacy. So there can be these more private, intimate consultation moments where people can really get help with whatever they need. And then, next slide. And then on this next one here, you can see the unfolded of the armadillo and see how that top surface, that top skate light surface on top of the armadillo kind of works as that counter or that shared space between the herbalist and the, patron, customer, user of the cart. And then you can see that that unfolded table comes off and acts as a whole separate surface from the rest of the cart. And then these next two drawings are going to show, we nickname them the IKEA drawings, but they really show how the carts actually go together and the material breakdown of the carts. So first here we are looking at the assembly material breakdown of the armadillo cart. So the material strategy for both of the carts was to have these workable skate-like surfaces, right, that wouldn't be get too worn or scratched or stained over time, so that they could really be worked on. But also from pretty early on with our first cardboard prototypes, we had this idea of aluminum wrapping around both of the carts in a shell. So as you can see here, everything that's powder coated aluminum, as you'll see later, is something that we got treated. We got it powder coated and bent by two different, we outsourced both of those things. And this is how basically both carts have a steel frame. They have skate light surfaces, and then they have this aluminum shell that wraps everything together. And we're gonna be able to see that here too in a second with the explosion of the Camelback cart, which really has the same strategy, which is the steel frame, which we've welded together, mounted on a skate light base, then the skate light surfaces, and then that aluminum that wraps everything together. The main difference with the Camelback, of course, being that it has these big aluminum wings that really kind of open up and close the cart. And then I believe next we're going to look at some renders from Zach.
If you could stop sharing screen so I can. Oh, great. Yeah, so because these carts are these dynamic sort of mobile units, the idea of having a site was pretty foreign to us. So to think about these carts as sort of being able to be deployed anywhere, it was interesting to sort of think about how people would interact with these carts. So you can see here with the Camelback, sort of that wing that folds out provides this sort of protected consultation space, while also offering a space to have interaction across the cart. And then on the left here, we have the Armadillo, which is, I'd say, more product-based, and it's really showcasing these apothecary sort of teas and tinctures as sort of the focus. And this idea that Jeremy had brought up about transformers, so how the cart could sort of be one thing when it's in transit, and then how it could sort of unfold and provide opportunities for different types of interactions and different types of programs. So here is sort of an abstraction of Washington Square, which is about a mile from where these carts would be stored. So thinking about places that are accessible by bike, that these carts could be deployed. And then thinking about how these carts would be unpacked and then actually used when on site. And then if you want to stop share, I can share my screen clear. And then this, the second sort of part of this was how all these moving parts sort of come together. So here is an animation showing sort of everything pulled out and how that cart really transforms. So you can see we call them the storage modules right here, which are able to be taken out of the cart and sort of placed in either the Armadillo or the Camelback. And you have more permanent drawers here, which are more secure for patient files and just things that they want to leave in the cart. And then also giving a space for shading. So having an umbrella stand was important just for having these consultations and having a comfortable space. And then the Armadillo here, so you can see how those modules would sort of be interchanged. They would go in sort of different orientations depending on the different carts here. And this, like I was saying, this cart, it can still be used for consultations, but it's a little bit more lightweight, a little bit more mobile, and it's much more based on the actual products that the Solitary Gardens is producing. And then going back to sort of the idea about these dynamic modules, becoming flexible to a different variety of scales of things they're holding. We started to think about the inserts as the dynamic piece. So creating an insert that can fit a multitude of different scales of jars while also fitting within the system that we've already created was really important. So Jackie and Jen would be able to fit all of their jars and products in these modules and sort of be able to easily transfer them between carts. So that was a really important idea that we sort of carried out. Yeah, so the actual program of these carts was pretty loose towards the beginning of the semester. So we really had to investigate how we wanted these carts to be used, and also taking information from Jackie about sort of what would be the easiest and most accessible for her. So yeah, this is just showing sort of how the carts unpack there. And I'm going to stop sharing if you want to hop back on, Claire.
We're going to pivot over to Dana and Anna for a minute to talk a little bit more about the process of constructing these things. But again, if anybody has questions, feel free to throw them out.
All right. So hello, my name is Dana. And Anna, Deeg, and I worked on the technical drawings for this project. And for the project, the drawings we needed for construction can be organized into sort of two categories: the overall design and dimensions, and then the details and construction. So the overall design and dimensions are kind of like your traditional axons, sections, plans, and elevations. And then the details in construction include the connection details, and then individual drawings of individual pieces organized by material. And the individual pieces became very important drawings for the actual construction process. Because the steel, plywood, and skate-light elements were all made by hand by us in the shop at the small center. And then the aluminum drawings were sent with the pieces of aluminum that we milled. The drawings were sent to Jolie's for their reference to bend all of the pieces that we sent.
And I would add, on a personal note, this was a great first learning exercise in how to really communicate through drawing, which we talk about a lot in school, but when you actually go to build something, obviously it needs to communicate your idea as you want it to be built. So this was great, at least for me, and empowering to be able to actually do that, to draw something and then see it built. Which I think everyone felt that way, but especially doing these technical drawings is very rewarding. But enough about my personal thoughts. Getting more into the construction process, this quickly started to go into the computer, although I included some sketches that I had made initially, but a lot of this was researching, asking Emily about details, and then kind of experimenting and finding drawers around the small center to look at how those were connected and how we could recreate that. So we sort of went about the construction process following the material breakdown that Claire had talked about. So we started with the steel frame, and this, I think, for all of us, or most of us, was the first time we welded steel. So it was very exciting and a big learning curve. And also another lesson to kind of react to changes. So the steel is not always going to be perfect 90 degrees. So then you have to work off of that throughout the rest of the process. So we started with the steel frame and then started with the marine grade plywood, which I think Lizzie mentioned was the main bulk of the interiors of both the Camelback and the Armadillo. And this material is pretty familiar to most of us. So this was a little bit easier in the sense that we already knew how to cut it, and it was a little bit more predictable. And then we worked at the skate light, which is a paper-based product, but it reacts and works a lot like wood. And the most fun part, in my opinion, was using the trim router to get these curved edges. That was a debate for a while, or a question about how to get those edges correct. And we ended up using sort of the, we had various methods. We constructed some curves to get that curve right. And then we also used the aluminum to wrap around. And so after kind of putting the skate light down and all these other steel and plywood pieces, the aluminum came in last and was, as we've mentioned before, the kind of wrapping shell for both Camelback and Armadillo. Oh, I talked about that next. I included the drawer slides because that was a little bit of a discovery with the details and how those actually worked. We had to do some YouTube research to figure those out. And now I look at every drawer around me and I think that's not that hard. I could build that myself, which was exciting. And it was exciting to see these actually slide in and out. So then once we had these drawer slides sort of working, good to go, then we added the aluminum pieces, which we had milled and then powder coated, I think is the proper term, at Jolie's. And this was sort of the shell wrapping around Armadillo and Camelback, as I said before. And I think this might be the piece that was the biggest lesson in kind of how to correct and how to try things out, especially with the Camelback wings. That was a big learning process of how to get those to work and to function. Really every part that swings or moves out was, it required a learning curve to figure out how to make that work, which I think we all in the end felt comfortable with.
All right. And so echoing a little bit what Anna said when she started, I think we all learned a lot this semester. And one of the first lessons we learned was the importance of precision, especially early on, because going back to the steel frame, since we were all very new at welding, we discovered that even minor mistakes at the very beginning with that steel frame affected everything that followed. And that also emphasized the importance of double checking the true dimensions of the cart and the frame before cutting pieces according to the perfect dimensions of the drawings themselves.
Sorry, the photos take a little longer to load.
Yeah, they were kind of, it was a bit of a large file on my part, my bad. But they're great photos. All right. And we also, with our tight schedule, fairly tight schedule, we had to put off some of the decisions about finer details and extra elements so we could order materials and begin construction. So with that, we had to anticipate potential problem areas where we thought, well, this shelf pictured in the bottom middle photo might need some extra support. So we had to have solutions in mind for when that came. And when that did inevitably come, we already had a solution in mind and we could fix it pretty quickly. Similarly, we had to learn to adapt and adjust as needed, and always be flexible with making quick design decisions when you're faced with a problem while in the shop, and adapting to those unforeseen changes and dimensions. And particularly with some of the bent aluminum pieces, they were ever so slightly off, and so was the frame. Everything ended up being ever so slightly off, and so you have to be really flexible with adapting to those. And in other words, we had to learn tolerance and adaptability and flexibility. And then another thing was COVID-19 constraints. So pictured in the top left here, we have Lizzie working on our boxes at home. Well, Lizzie and Danelle is not pictured, but we had to figure out how to incorporate those who were quarantined into the construction process, which was interesting.
No COVID though, guys. We're all good.
We're all good. We just got high off of the polyurethane. Sorry, forgot to signal the screen change.
Hello, my name is Rebecca. So taking a quick step back from the carts, the fabrication class did an investigation in CNC milling with MDF to test how well you can convey textures and patterns on a material using a CNC machine. So luckily Tulane has its own CNC lab that I work at. And so I was like kind of the liaison between the lab and the class to get some of those test cuts in. So here you can kind of see some of those beginning tests to see like if we can get organic or like manufactured materials to convey well, and different materials that we might be working with throughout like the construction process. So this was like kind of before we had made any decision about what materials were going to be on the carts. But once we did decide on aluminum as the skin for the carts, we had to kind of figure out how to make these like approachable, since they're gonna serve as space makers for conversation and herbal medicine dispensaries and like places that people are going to like come to, and like they're gonna be kind of deployed somewhere, and then we hopefully have people walk up to them, ask questions, have conversations. We wanted to like I said, make these approachable. Claire, did you go to the next slide? So to kind of keep in line with the partner organizations, we came to a series of iterations of perforation patterns, which is on the next slide. But Lizzie and a couple other people worked with different spirals, different patterns of what we could use as perforations. And we kind of arrived at one specific one, which some of you might know, the Fibonacci series, or spiral, there we go, on the left, which is also known as the sunflower spiral. So we kind of wanted to keep in line with our partner organization that does a lot with plants and with seeds, and the idea that these carts are going to be seeds for conversation on like larger topics. And so you can kind of see the different iterations of patterns that we kind of worked with before making a final decision of the Fibonacci one, which is on the left. And so once we had our construction pieces in line and our pattern decided, we basically got to work. And so we started with 4x8 sheets of aluminum and a lot of files for cutting. And then I started with some test cuts because aluminum isn't a really common material that we work with at the mill house. And so a lot of bits were broken and a lot of frustration was had. But after those test cuts, I figured it out. We were ready to go. And it took almost 24 hours, not consecutive, to cut all of these pieces. Lots of long shifts. But yeah, it took almost about a day to make all the cuts. And then, being able to use like the 2-lane CNC lab was like a huge part of the process. And so that was like really helpful. Once we got all the pieces cut, we could send them to other places to do the next steps in the construction process. And then I was asked to plug our Instagram at 2-Lane Arch Labs. So if you're interested in seeing like the work that 2-Lane does, that's our Instagram. But yeah, so here are some of the test cuts on the left and then some of those final cuts happening on the right. The Imagine a Landscape Without Prisons took about 6 hours to do just that circle and those letters. And then lots of metal shavings in my car all over the lab, but it was honestly like such a cool learning experience and a huge part of the construction process. And then there's a broken bit in my hand at the bottom.
While we wait for the slide to change, I just want to say there's a couple more slides about process and final photos, and then we're going to kind of stop for some discussion, in case anyone's wondering.
So we just wanted to plug our outsourcing. We had a lot of local assistance, which was really, really valuable for our team. We had Workhouse, specifically working with Eric Lynn. He's in the first picture. We went over to use his metal brake in order to bend the aluminum for all of the boxes, or what we've been calling the storage modules. And he was really kind enough to teach us how to do that. And then we also got the metal or the aluminum bent at Jolie's, and they were really, really great. We then got it powder coated at Kirkfield's. That's the middle picture. You can see that we picked it up and it was all nicely bubble wrapped and everything. And then we also got custom bike trailers from Jack Fabulous at Ultropolis. And I think part of the semester was understanding that we can't do absolutely everything ourselves, and leaning on local support. Sorry, you can go to the next slide.
This is the fun part. This is the glossy photos part. We started off talking about all of this stuff. We've gone through all of the process, and now we get to see what it looked like. And props to Jose. So thank you, Jose, for going out with us and for helping us take these photos. We talked about the handles before, and we went through a lot of different iterations, and we had a lot of different discussions about them. But we decided that the handles were ultimately going to mimic those modules or those boxes that we've been talking about that are removable on the cart and that are held in with this aluminum piece in the back. And on each of these handles is the Latin or scientific name of the plants, predetermined plants that we got from Jackie. They're laser etched into each of them. It was one of those moments that we were talking about earlier where we were talking about the humanity of the cart and the tactability of it. How soft is this going to be? Is it a conversation piece? How can we turn something very simple into something that is very impactful? So this was one of those opportunities that we had. We went with one handle design in the entirety of the cart. They're long handles. We again had to discover how are people going to grab these and how is it going to be best served for everybody in using them. The other next steps that we were discussing in terms of small to large details of the cart is this cutting board, and how is that going to sit on top? How is it going to be stored? How can we turn these, again, simple opportunities into something that can be used for the greater good of the cart and ultimately benefit the people who are using them the most? We also, again, tried to figure out these little storage areas. One of the trials that we had was we wanted to put these curves on the cart. Great, but working with curves is a bear. So how are we going to take the storage and how are we going to turn it into something that was more functional, again, for everybody to use? You see Dana here in this shot, and she's accessing what we call the little personal effects cubby. When people are riding the bikes and pulling these carts, they need a place to put their personal effects. So we decided that we're going to put a door on this, and this is how it's going to operate. But again, it's very open. We didn't try to pre-program everything. Here you see Danelle operating the cart with the removable modules. Again, we tried to keep these pretty loose, and those, as I mentioned and you saw before, those boxes are actually held on just by a simple aluminum bend hook that you hook through the handle on the back, and then they'll stay stationary within the cart while you're riding. Hopefully it doesn't jiggle out of the cart. That was the intent of that, because that was something we were concerned about, that and the noise of when you're riding around. Taking tiny details, as Dana mentioned and as Anna mentioned, and trying to figure out how these are going to operate was something that we heavily had to think about, especially since this was a smaller project and we had to really consider what it's going to look like at the personal scale, because people are right up close and personal with this. What's it going to look like? Things like this corner that you see here, we had to figure out how are we going to get that logo to turn that corner so that it's readable both when it's closed and when it's open. So here you see Bhumika, shout out, understanding and operating the cart when it's open, and then you can see it later when it's closed. Here again, you can see that the Apothecart logo is open, but it also reads when it's closed, but we had to create two different details for that. Dana here is also modeling our ideas for stools and our storage in the back of the Camelback cart. We showed before that we tested and tried several different options for chairs, and ultimately, as we said before, they were beautiful failures. We did fail a lot, and we decided that we can't reinvent everything. We can't reinvent the wheel, and in this case, we can't reinvent the chair. So we decided that we were going to test and use several different prefabricated stools and just outsource for that, but try and figure out which one is going to be at the best height, which one is the best material, which one is the best and most comfortable to sit in. And this was one of the options. This is showing how the carts work in operation, also with that fabulous umbrella that we have. It's trying to understand how there could be interaction, not just between the person that is on the consultation side of the cart, but someone who's trying to approach the cart, and how a conversation can easily happen from one side to the other and vice versa. Lizzie, I love the handkerchief in your shot. This is looking at both the carts deployed next to each other and understanding what it looks like when everything is out and open. We've seen lots of drawings, we've seen lots of diagrams, and seeing this thing in real life is really, it's the model, it's the thing that you can get your hands on and you finally understand and see this is what everybody's talking about. So here we see Zach operating with the inserts that he was discussing and how those boxes fit together. And again, how people are interacting across the different carts once they're deployed, once they're open. Those wings were also meant to kind of be a bit of an invitation to people to come and to try and feel this embrace of conversation and the familiarity of someone who's just wanting to talk to you and share some ideas with you and have a casual conversation with you. These are both of the carts packaged up, I guess you could say. These trailers are designed so that they can attach to any bike. So there is an attachment that simply hooks around the seat pole, I guess, the seat metal part of the bike, and it doesn't need any special bike to be pulled. And the bike tires are also easily removable. So if there gets to be a point where there's a flat tire, you should be able to take it off pretty easily. There are real cavities within each of these. So hopefully when it's New Orleans, when it's going to rain, none of the interior of the cart should be affected. I guess I should also mention that a lot of the components of this cart are held in place via magnets. The magnets are helping to keep everything closed while in transit, as you can see here, demonstrated by the lovely Anna and the amazing Zach. A lot of the magnet closures are then accessed by the handles. Again, that tactability of the first thing that people touch. And the general door closure or drawer closures that we have on the carts have an inset stop in them so that they won't jiggle open when in transit. That's also part of the thought we had behind those inserts, is trying to keep everything steady while in transit, because we are working with glass, sometimes the plastic. We later developed inserts for those boxes as well, that are little trays that are not shown here in the glossy photos because they are just now being completed. But this is the whole team. We had a very fun time. Lots of different accents were thrown around the studio. Lots of sawdust, lots of metal, little fairy dust floating everywhere. But I think overall, it's one of the most, I think a lot of us would say that this is probably one of the most pleasant studios that we've ever been in. And shout out to Emily as well for being our captain, my captain.
I think that this is going to be after break. Do y'all want to unshare the screen and we can have a conversation? All right, so that was sort of a recap, photos and all. And yeah, invite any criticisms, feedbacks, thoughts.
I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out. I just don't want to be alone with my freak out. It is so amazing to see them functioning, built, alive, you guys around them. I'm so grateful. I am so grateful. I'm beyond words, so I'm just going to leave it to the other full-blown adults, so my partial adult self can just like bask in joy right now.
I have a couple of questions. Really phenomenal work. You all should be really, really proud. Those cards are really beautiful. I have a couple of questions about kind of functionality that are particular maybe to New Orleans. And then also a question reaching back to some of the project tenants, close to what Anne raised earlier. So I guess I'll start with the functionality question first. Does the hitch also hitch onto a car or a truck? I missed that.
It does not.
So if I wanted to take that cart, and can someone of like my body size like move this thing when it's loaded down with big, ball jars of tinctures and?
Yes.
Okay. So if I wanted to take this out to the east, right, like to the village east, like way far out there, I have to write it out there to that neighborhood? Is that the idea?
Yeah, it would either have to be ridden or transported like in a van or a pickup truck or anything like that. Like it could be secured in any of those ways as well. It just can't be towed by a vehicle. And that doesn't only have to do with the hitch, but also just like the wheels and the speed that it's like rated for, and just kind of its constitution. Like it just wouldn't be good for the cart for it to be moving over that kind of terrain at that speed, etc. So it doesn't only have to do with the attachment. They were definitely designed for like a certain level of travel, and that travel is either they can easily be pulled by one person. But yeah, they were definitely designed for bikes, and that is something that we explored early on. I think Lizzie showed it a little bit with our early design iterations, but we kind of had a lot of exploration in terms of, should we build something that's like a flat pack that's like almost like a tent, or should we build something that is designed specifically to tow behind a vehicle and not a bike, etc. And yeah, the bike trailer is kind of what we settled on and committed to.
I think we reached the bike because it's a happy middle ground between it can go far distances with just one person operating it. And there's also the idea that you can use your own personal bike if you wanted to. There could be a few bikes on hand, and it would be going further than if it were just being pushed. And one person can operate it as opposed to several, which might take to load it up in a van.
Okay.
It's also again, like Adrian mentioned earlier, these are tender topics, but trying to understand the program will potentially be involving people who have just been released, and if they may not have immediate access to a car, but they do have access to a bike. We thought that would provide more option and more potential in this situation. But we did play around with the idea of having motorized bikes. That was a heavy debate.
Okay, well, my other question is more around the project tenants. I love especially your kind of, I know you want people to have conversations. I know Jackie wants people to have conversations at these things, and that was part of your goal. And I love these, especially these textures and the textured woods that you showed at the end. I think those are really, highlight kind of sensory, tactile ways to be engaged with the cart. And the flower is really beautiful, but it's not a dandelion. And I know that, like one of the big aspects of this project for Jackie was orienting around the dandelion and the kind of stigma of dandelion as a weed, as an invasive species. And it seems like foregrounding the dandelion in the design would be such a wonderful way to initiate conversations that are really directed around these themes of stigma, of punishment, of incarceration, that we're really trying to get people to rethink. And that the carts are there as an invitation to that. So I'm just curious about the flower selection and where the dandelion went, I guess.
Yeah, I think I can.
So, go ahead.
Okay, I think I can answer that. So yeah, in Jackie's proposal to the small center, it was the Dandelion Project. But then after we met her and started talking to her, we started talking a lot about Bidens, not to be confused with our president-elect, but Biden Pelosas are kind of the New Orleans equivalent to dandelions. They're the same kind of like beautiful weed that has like infiltrated the city and even like leaves behind these little prickly guys on people. And that's the flower that's on the back of the cart. And the semester became a lot more about Bidens rather than dandelions. And I think, yeah, we played a lot with that and thinking about that.
And the handles, talk about the handles.
Handles. Did a lot of handles. The handles are also, they have the Biden, there are a couple of them that have Biden Pelosa written on them. But Jackie, what was it, the name of the specific list that you gave me?
The handles, each one of them, Anna, is the Latin name of so-called weeds. Mm-hmm. For exactly illustrating the same conversation. And the sort of cue from Jen, who is the herbalist we're pairing with, was that, you know, dandelions are the most obvious, but they don't grow like Bidens down here. And so if the carts are going to be deployed in New Orleans, and we are deploying them informed by the strategy of one of our most prolific weeds, it would be Biden's Pilosa. So that's the flower. And then, like I said, each one of the handles is a different prolific so-called weed that, you know, as, you know, if someone is asking, hand me the blah, 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 it's in Albizia julibrissin, then we're also familiarizing ourselves with the names of weeds and their value. Yeah.
We definitely were stuck on the dandelion name though, and thank you for reading the brief and the RFP, because that's exactly what it was called. But I think even halfway through the semester, our online drive folder was called Dandelions until we finally switched it. So, and it's totally understandable where did this flower come from? But I also think that it's worth mentioning that Jackie brought this flower to us at the very beginning after she had some trials in her life, 2020, y'all. And it had really impacted her on a personal level during that time as well. So we thought that was important and a nice inclusion for us to make. It was fun.
Another happy coincidence is that Biden petals have these two teeth on them, which is what the name comes from. So it's nice how that relates to the two cards that we've been with.
I'll maybe say a few things. I'll try to jump in here. This is fantastic. I mean, it's so great to see like all this work, you know, and to be able to pull off a collaborative project like this in a semester like this. I mean, I think like, you know, you raised the bar quite a bit, you know, so it's really a wonderful body of work. So you know, it's also very encouraging to hear that all of you seem to have such a positive experience with the work experience and the educational environment as well. I do have like, there's a lot to take in, you know, and so I'm trying to absorb, you know, from point one to where you are now. And I'm trying to think about the whole process and the project and what to improve upon, what to critique, what to kind of commend everybody on. And I think like, you know, one of the persistent themes that came up was sort of what do you design and what do you buy off the shelf, or what do you have somebody else fabricate? And so my understanding is you designed the steel frame for the cart. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And I was wondering, I mean, this is just an observation of one of those moments where I was wondering if like, you know, could you buy an off the shelf like cart and then think of that as a site? So then you think of like a micro site for, you know, the cart environment, you know, and then you focus more on the design of the boxes and the armatures and all of that sort of thing. And so I was wondering, like, you know, where's the give and take there? And I think kind of a wonderful diagram might actually be the relationship between what is designed and what is off the shelf and what is fabricated by somebody else. And just sort of, so you see that very clearly played out, and then you can start to make decisions. And part of that is to think of what the end game of this is. So is it something like, is this a prototype for a product? Is this a one-off where there's only going to be 2 of these ever built? And I think like the budget constraints, you know, things like that start to really play into play into it if it's meant to be not just a one-off thing. And this seems like it wants to be a product. And then and I'll drop some links in, but I was furiously while you're all talking, I was looking up some websites, and you've probably all seen these things, but there was one called Biz on Wheels. I don't know if you've seen this thing yet, but I mean, I'm wondering if that's your competition. Like, is that your competition? Or are you like, no, that's just mass produced. Like, we don't want that. That's not our shtick. They're also like metal and all black, and they have like a totally different vibe. So like, but I think you want to start to think about like, what's your competition, or what's your market, but then I was also thinking about a few articles, different articles, since I'm the, I guess, resident theorist on board here. But there's an article that I always assign in my Artifacts of Architectural Production class, and it's a piece by David Pye, and it's called The 6 Requirements for Design. And I'll put the PDF in the chat, but I'll just briefly summarize them. But one is arrangement, geometrically related. There's 6 requirements. So arrangement, geometrically related, strong enough, access, cost, and appearance. And I know you all have different metrics and different variables that you're working with, but I think all of those things start to play into the effect that you're producing in this project. And so I think like those are variables, at least according to Pi, are ones that you can start to sort of evaluate your outcomes and your decision making upon. And I think all that stuff really lends itself to being very self-aware and also critical of what the project is and what it's attempting to be and how it came into being. And then lastly, this is sort of an age-old question, right? I'm referencing Pevsner, and this is like, 100 years ago or so. And he differentiates the bicycle shed from the cathedral. You've all heard this, right? And Pevsner's, kind of bummer argument is the bicycle shed is not architecture, but the cathedral is, right? So that's something that's been critiqued long time, right? But it raises the important question of where the architecture is. What is architecture? How do you define that? This is a school of architecture. What are the parameters of design and architecture, and where do they overlap? Graphic designers that's a whole degree, right? So logo design, which is, you made a fantastic logo, but is that an architect's responsibility? And so I'm just posing that as a question to think critically about where your expertise needs to be and where you rely on others. Because if you're hiring a fabricator to do, powder coated painting, where does that overlap begin and end? And then so there's a recent, so last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop because I'm also talking a lot because I have to leave in 15 minutes. But I'll put this link in there too, but it was a recent debate that referenced that Pevsner piece. And it was a bunch of scholars and academics and different people talking about that context. But again, it's just sort of like, where does the architecture live? That's something that I'm always fascinated in. Yeah, I think that's it. I guess the last question I'll pose is, I understand the social context of the studio, and I know that that's an important aspect of its mission and the goals of its successes. And I'm curious how that actually plays out in the end product. Like, I know like there's a client or, a client or a partner, and I know that it's meant to serve a particular need, but how is it different than what's typically done in a design sequence or a design studio where, there's needs and partners all the time? So how is this different than like a typical sort of relationship between, the designed thing and the social component? And then I'll stop.
Ben, when you're asking that, are you asking them to talk about the difference between their typical studio experience with a program and partner, or more like a office style project?
I guess anything. I guess what I'm wanting them to be able to speak to is how is design and justice made impactful through this project or through this process? And how does the end product participate in that as a thing, as a piece of consciousness. Like what is the output that links it to the social mission, right? So like, for example, you know, I have a friend who studies green schools, and the objective that she's interested in is, do green schools teach green behavior, right? Does a project that has a social mission teach certain behaviors? And that's, I guess, the intrigue.
I guess I could try and take a stab at that. I think the first part of your question is, how did working on this facilitate, you know, that sort of change and that push towards abolition? And I think just being a part of this project with Jackie, her mission, like all of the work that she's done thus far has, you know, totally brought all of those concepts of prison abolition and mass incarceration to the forefront of all of our brains. And yes, we were building this thing for her that doesn't speak or talk or whatever, but we have integrated onto the cart messages like, you know, the logo, which was important for us, which then becomes very important to the architecture to sort of speak to that mission. And as we go on in our presentation, we've added things that we hope will make sure that this sort of action and advocacy component that we're all very, you know, excited and feel that is very important to us is implemented. And, you know, we trust Jackie, you know, we trust her mission. We trust the program that she has, you know, integrated into this thing that we have built. And I think this built thing helps her facilitate her mission in the community. And so I think that's how it kind of all ties together, and that the architecture, the program, the people, the person all work in tandem to sort of bring this mission and this abolition to the forefront, and to push it forward, and to, you know, as Jackie would say, disseminate like seeds into the community and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the follow-up question, I think that's a great response. And I think a follow-up question would be, how does the same objective exist without a partner, without that partner? And how do you then build those initiatives or goals into a client that doesn't necessarily have that as an origin point?
Right. I think, well, first of all, you have to have the right client. I don't think everyone's going to be like totally into, you know, a certain passion of yours. But I think, you know, like Jackie has kind of told us that there's these small steps that you can take, you know, at chipping away at this sort of, you know, problem. And I think, you know, in architecture, we have that sort of responsibility to do that. And whether it's, you know, building a school that's green or, you know, something else, but those small, like sort of like chipping away at things, I think is where you can start, and hopefully, you know, convince people that this is something that's important. This is something that's not just affecting people who are targeted with mass incarceration. It affects all of us, whether we know it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not. It's important. And I think that comes across with, you know, the drawings, the purpose of the project, how you present it, how you get people involved, and something that you need to be passionate about.
I would also add, if I can, I think this is also sort of a foundational question, and we've talked about this as a group before, but I think it sort of comes back to education and what is happening right now. Just personally, this whole studio and semester has changed my own design outlook, and then hearing your comments about competition and marketability, perhaps more sort of design architecture situation language, I just realized that it was somewhat jarring to me, because I've been thinking differently from this studio. I've been thinking more about the humanity. And it's not just a thing that is of aluminum and steel. And here you go, Jackie, this is it. But the care we've put into all the details and the material and the labeling has, I think, at least for me, shown how much architecture can be about the person, and not just Jackie, but also the user, also the people who might see someone biking this down the road or might actually come up to it. It just is so empowering for me, this whole experience, and that's a part of my education. So I think if every architect were to have an educational experience talking about design equity or maybe prison abolition, that could start having ripple effects throughout the whole industry. I kind of went on a tangent, so I'm not sure if that was your real question.
Well, I like that, Anna, and the fact that you say that there's this humanistic like intention behind it. Like Ben, you mentioned there's this company that makes these, and I think humans, we can tell when something is mass produced and when something is built with care, intention, detail, and all of that. And it brings that more of like, oh, you care about this. Like there's that sort of like humanistic quality that a lot of like, public housing is missing, mass produced things are missing. And so I think that's also like going off what you said, Anna, is like having that humanistic intention. I think people can feel that and they know that when they're gonna, approach these carts.
I also think, to jump off of that, what you said, Ben, about maybe buying like a pre-existing cart and using that as the site, I think there were other things that were pre-existing that we had to work around or adapt to that became sort of the site of each cart. The initial thing being the bike trailers, right? Because we did not design the bike trailers. So that's something that, and we did consider possibly trying to design or build bike trailers early on, and decided against that. And we had several moments like that throughout the entire process in which we were actively deciding whether we should build something from scratch or order it. I mean, we had that with the stools, with the like even drawers, like handles, like it seems like almost every step of the way there was something in which we were like, okay, should we design this and build it, or should we just order it? Because obviously it's incredibly available. And I think that those decisions got made in both directions. In some cases we did decide to just order things, and in other cases we decided to build things from scratch. And I think that the two things that went into those decisions, like Adrienne was just touching on, is like authenticity. Like the handles, for example, one of the reasons that we decided to build the handles from scratch, through many trials and errors done by Danielle, instead of just purchase a standard handle, is because we really felt like it added some kind of like personal, authentic touch to the carts. And I think you can see that in the photographs. And then the trailers, for example, and the chairs, we decided not to build from scratch after trial and error, because we are just not experts in those things and they need to work extremely well. So I think that became the second element that went into those decisions, was like, are there people who have a lot more experience and research and have committed their life to designing this type of object that's going to make it more reliable? So like the chairs, we wanted them to be accessible. And we know that we tried to design several chairs and came to a point where we just realized that, we are not chair designers, and that's something that takes like a lot of expertise. And, whatever chairs we produce would probably not be super reliable compared to someone who has committed their entire craft to designing chairs. So I think that those were kind of the two things that went into those decisions in terms of what to build from scratch. But pretty much every step of the way, we were making those decisions.
These are all great responses, and sorry, I keep jumping in here, but I'll stop and then I gotta run. I threw in another link to an outdoor company that makes some interesting kind of compartmentalization features in products. Oh God, now I lost my train of thought. I was thinking too fast. Shoot, sorry, I'll try to think of it really quick. Oh God. I'll stop talking. Sorry.
I do want to acknowledge the question though, Ben, of like competition and stuff. Sorry, Anne. I'll try to be really brief, but because we are, I mean, to the outside person who doesn't understand any of this or hasn't been living in the world that we've been living in for a while, they might see this cart riding down the road, and yeah, they'll probably be able to tell that this is custom. But on the other hand, they're going to be looking at it and thinking, oh, what is that? Why would I want to visit that versus I want to visit something else? And I'm starting this thought before I've even thought about how I'm going to finish it. But I think that custom factor is something we're going to have to rely on. But like Adrian said, I think that in our instance, we are unable to divorce the people from the platform. That the cart itself, that we recognize that, as Claire mentioned, we're not experts, but we're also not experts in abolition. We're not experts in the mission that Jackie has. And we are trying to use what little knowledge we have and provide the best platform to our abilities for her to jump off of. And I think that's going to have to be the difference for me. As much care and tender, loving care that I've tried to put into this cart, it's ultimately going to, I'm not saying like this is an ultimatum, it's finally going to hinge on the people who use this, but it's going to be up to the people now who use it. It's kind of like, you know, a normal building, in my opinion, where, you know, you provide them the platform and you've prescribed it as best you can. But it's up to the people how they use it. Are they going to figure out the cow path, and are they going to totally disrupt? Oh my gosh, that's not where I wanted them to go. Or are they going to use it in the exact way that you anticipated it? I guess we're going to find out. And I think it's going to be fun to watch. Go ahead, Ann. Sorry.
The last question I'll ask, and then I gotta run, and then I'll run. Which one is better, the Camelback or the Armadillo? I know which one is.
Both gems.
Let's make a poll.
Actually, though, you bring up an interesting point. We were very intentional all semester about constantly switching teams. I think everybody has had their hand in every almost single part of the design process. And it's funny because nobody can say like, oh, like, you know, like that one's my cart, because we really were like very diversified in our work.
Yeah, Lizzie, I think that's a good point. And I think it goes to what Ben was asking earlier about expertise. Like, I think we have a very like diverse array of talents and interests in this group, and with this collaboration with Jackie. And I think that was one of the really successful parts of the semester for me, was seeing everyone get to put their specific interests and skill sets sort of to the bat and like step up to the plate for that. Like, we have a mixed bag of undergrads and grads, and people have gone to school for things completely different. And I think that throughout the semester, you could see everyone's like interest or like special attachment. They could sort of fulfill that to the cart, which I think is ultimately what made it a successful project in my mind.
As somebody who's spent their whole career building custom products, I think y'all did a really wonderful job, just generally speaking. It's a beautiful end product. It's very intentional. It seems to check all the and I do have a couple of.
You're cutting out, Mike. Can anybody else hear him? We can't hear you.
I'll drop him a note in the chat.
We can't hear what you're saying. I think your microphone's messed up.
Hear anything?
You want to try again? No. Do you have headphones maybe? Nope. The joys of Zoom communication. Oh,
Hear me?
yes.
Okay, great. Good. Sorry about that. Sorry. I used to consider myself someone who was good at Zoom, not anymore. So I'll start from the very beginning. I've spent my entire career building custom products and custom spaces and custom environments for people. So I've never built anything twice. I've never replicated an item. And so with that being the primary foundation of my background, I definitely want to say that this was an excellent project. I think the end result is beautiful. I think it is very intentional, and according to everything that we discussed when I came in for the midway review, y'all really seem to have hit the nail on the head, and I'm very proud of y'all for doing that. I also want to say, and unfortunately Ben left, but I didn't fully agree with what he said. I think his question posed was a little bit out of context, but with that being said, I as a fabricator and also as a designer with no architecture background, let me very clearly state that, I have always had this conflict in my career where I've had to work with architects, dozens, probably close to 100, if not 100 plus architects in my career. And every single one of them has a different outlook on design. That is human nature. So that's something all of you as students of the trade should understand now, and you will develop into that in your own way. But something that is very common amongst most architects is the lack of awareness of the fabrication side of their project. And I think that the beauty in this is that y'all are getting a wonderful hands-on experience with the design build element of architecture, which is the future trend of the industry. And I also think is a better way to learn. It's hard to learn how to cook something without trying to cook it. It's the same thing with architecture and design in general. So on that note, I'm very proud of y'all also for collaborating with local experts in the areas and fields in which you felt it was necessary, because it is not necessary to collaborate with someone for everything, but there are certain areas of the fabrication process that are much better left to professionals, like bending aluminum. It is incredibly difficult to do. I have bent aluminum by hand before. It took weeks and I should have outsourced it, but I learned my lesson the hard way. I used heat guns and it was a mess. So hats off to y'all for understanding where and when you should be collaborating, because that is, in my opinion, one of the key tenets in design and build, just generally speaking. Where do I do this? Where do I have someone else do this? And how do we create a synergy amongst our skills to come out with the best end product? The second thing I'd like to say is this should serve as a really powerful lesson for y'all in intentional and realistic design. You know, fabricators, construction teams, anyone in any trade, when we don't have a hand in the design process, it becomes very, very, very difficult to work through things like budgetary concerns or restraints, timelines, things like that. And so this is a wonderful example of a successful project where y'all had to understand the end result and the outcome, and you had to do it with a budget, with a timeline. And now I don't know if the timeline was messed up by COVID or by something else, but these are real parameters to design in the real world. And unfortunately, a lot of architects and designers who don't have a hand or who don't have experience in fabrication, they do their job and then they hand it off, and the project only gets harder at that point because the person who created or conceptualized this end result is no longer a part of that chain. And so I think this is a wonderful lesson in realistic, pragmatic design where you need to be connected to the end result, not just theoretically, but also in a very real way, like you guys are building it. So I think this is just a wonderful example of why the small center is so valuable for architecture students in general. But these kinds of projects are just, they're wonderful. And this is what, in my opinion, will change the future of design and justice and creating a more equitable outcome for architecture and design in general. So that's the bulk of what I had to say. I do have some questions about the budget when we get to it. But also, I'll say this, we at Goodwood have never competed with anybody. And that's not because we are like better, it's just because that's not how we view our work. When you work in a trade like custom design build, you have no room to be competing with anybody. You need to become best friends with your competitors, because really at the end of the day, there are very few firms in the whole world, but especially in the States, that do this kind of work. And I know many, many, many people who do what most would consider competing work to mine that I'm very close with. We share prices, we share trade secrets, we share everything. There is no such thing as competition when it comes to equity in design. And that is a very important lesson for all of y'all to learn. And I wish Ben was still here, but unfortunately he's not. So take it from someone who has spent the better part of the last 10 years building things for people. That is an invaluable lesson. You're never competing.
And
I'd like to, oh, sorry, Anne, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, I feel like, thank you for that, Michael. And since Ben had to jump away, I feel like I need to be the one who says about often what, as all of you who know Ben, he often poses those questions so that I think he didn't understand, right, the difference between custom and configuration. But you also know he comes from, also often poses those questions to get all of you thinking. So he sees that as himself. So I feel like I just want to put that out there, since for those of you who don't know him, that he often is prodding, right? Okay, I'm gonna let it go back to Edson.
Thanks, Anne. I'd like to echo also what Mike also said earlier about how I think like seeing the end product is one thing, and seeing how beautiful it is and how functional it is. I really, oh, can you hear me? Okay. How I really appreciate the effort and the work that all of you have done. One thing that I noticed from the presentation was the idea of how everybody seemed to appreciate the honesty and then the humility of the process. I really appreciated that part, because I could sense from how you were describing the process, the design decisions that you made, that and even the fabrication, that you were all sensitive to the context, and that you were also then humbled by the process, that you were accepting the fact that you don't know everything. And I think that's a very good sign that all of you are learning from this process, because you are acknowledging that you don't know everything, that you do need to collaborate, and that you do need the help of others, you know. And I'm glad to hear that, because not a lot of architects, as Mike had pointed out, really acknowledge that even. So I'm glad to hear that. One thing that I also wanted to acknowledge is that I'm glad to hear Jackie was so ecstatic at the beginning. You know, she immediately was shouting and really happy with the product, because that's a great testament on how I think the group was able to make this successful. That it's about engaging with the users, engaging and really collaborating with Jackie. I think that's fantastic, and I think she. I could sense from the presentation also, and then the final product, that then you really listened to Jackie, and that you really communicated with her, and then she also then was really part of the process. And so I think that's a very great component of this, and I'm hoping that you will all take this as part of your learning experience as you move forward. One thing that I also wanted to ask, maybe specifically, is that then, you know, I was just thinking about how you were talking about the tactility in terms of like how this needs to be approachable and something that that needs to be really looked at the human level. I forget who was mentioning about the humanity of this project, and I really appreciated that. So one thing that I wanted to ask specifically is that then, which made me think about the colors, right? And how maybe somebody can explain quickly, but then because I have a follow-up question with how did you decide on the colors? Because it was something, but I'll ask the follow-up question. Maybe I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can try to answer that. I think that we started the semester, we were looking at the Solitary Gardens website, and obviously we went out and we had our day with Solitary Gardens, and green definitely kept popping up over and over again. And I think in our earliest like signage explorations, we were thinking about different shades of green. And then there was actually kind of a filter on the color decision because of the powder coating availabilities. So that was probably the biggest kind of reality check for us, was seeing like what colors the powder coater had and what was kind of closest to what we would be happy with. We actually gave Jackie was the final word in that. We gave her about 4 different options. And she came in one day and we had a discussion about colors. So we went with the green from the powder coat, and then we decided that, these carts, as much as they're supposed to be like a beautiful item, they're also supposed to be welcoming and eye-catching. And I don't think prison abolition is like a quiet subject. So I think these cards kind of say something when they're out in the environment. And we chose like that brighter like pop of contrast, and our like reddish orange to kind of, just be a contrast and not be something that's like quiet and muted.
Thank you, Lizzie, for that answer, because that also made me think about the approachability of the cards, right? And how, because I've been hearing that throughout the presentation, and how I think the intention of the group is to make this approachable so that then people can actually come up to the cart and then engage with whoever is then sort of driving the cart or who is manning the cart. Because I think from what I've been hearing also, that as Jack had been saying, is that the conversation is really important. It's not just about the cart itself, but rather the cart fosters conversation, that it is a site for conversations to happen. And so that was something that kept me thinking about throughout the presentation, is that then the intentionality of the different elements is something that is very important. So I'm curious to hear then maybe from the group, how do you make this approachable? And also then how do you make this not intimidating, right? Just imagining, let's say that you have the cart driving through, or you put it in a park, or you put it somewhere. And I'm curious if you've ever thought about, are there other elements that you add? Is it something about these two carts working together? Is there another piece that adds to this? Because what kept me thinking about this is that then how do you actually encourage people to come up to the cart? It might be beautiful, right? But then you also have to think about, sometimes people might find it intimidating. And that's why that idea of the colors for me also was something that it's not something, I know that it might be defined and also dictated by the powder coating limitations. However, it's something to think about. What Lizzie was saying earlier, let's say, again, I'm just throwing this out. Let's say you make it bright red because you want it to stand out, versus, let's say, the green, so that the green sort of blends with the environment where it is, if it's in the garden or what. But the red can be very intimidating, or it can also be very attracting. And so it is a magnet also for people to come together. And so I wonder, have you thought about what else do you need to do so that then you actually make people come to this cart, right? Like, and you've been mentioning about the tactile part of it. Have you considered sound? The clanging of the bottles will be part of it, but then do you have music with it, to attract people, so that then people are actually hearing like, oh, it's the cart, just like the sound of the ice cream truck, with its music, it's so iconic that sometimes I feel like there's a creepy element to that sound music, but is there something about the sound as well? Because I think that's part of the engagement of the community. And then also, have you considered the smell, right? Because the tinctures, the soaps and all these products have like the smell and the aroma and the fragrances. Is that something that you also consider? So again, it's sort of like part of this larger question of how do you make it approachable and not intimidating, and how do you attract people to come to the cart once that the cart is there?
I don't think we thought about smell that much. That's fun.
Mid-review, there was conversation about sound and smell and expanding the space of the cart through these other senses. But I was wondering, Jackie, what's the soundtrack of this cart if it's rolling through the street?
Way to put me on the spot, Emily. I imagine the soundtrack for the cart well, first of all, let me just answer that seriously before I try to embarrass myself with a sharp joke. But we Solitary Gardens, the Prisoners Apothecary, are part of a larger group of mutual aid based organizations. And so plugging into things like Second Harvest or a needle exchange program, or all of these different things that are already happening and already scheduled is part of the ways that they will be activated. And then the students were tasked with a not easy prompt, which is how do you incorporate flexibility into that? So when I want to rock up and talk about abolition through a tea ceremony at the Daily Beat, how do I engage a completely different demographic of folks, right? And so in thinking about that, we've said this almost ad nauseum throughout the semester, employing the strategy of the plants themselves. So that might mean paper flyers in some cases, and that might mean like getting influencers on Instagram in other cases. And so we are thinking about that holistically. And also, in terms of music and soundtrack, one of the elements that design elements that they thought about was this Yeti battery that I have, and being with a solar pack and being able to create space that would host that so that we could have a microphone and speakers and we could rock up. Like we were dreaming about the uprisings that happened this summer and the way that the Prisoners Apothecary was able to provide plant medicine for organizers, very specifically to folks who were losing their voices in the middle of these uprisings. And so like, how could we also activate them to be sound systems and other things to supplement the inevitable conflicts of the colonized United States? Was definitely part of it. I don't want to lose the moment. And thank you so much, if you're on here, for really just letting me know the sort of history of Ben's participation. I definitely felt my heart beating a little bit faster, and I got really protective and defensive. And I'm mad that he left. Because I feel like it's a really important conversation to have. And what Michael said was so invaluable in the way that, from the lived experience, if we really want to dismantle the precision that the architects of white supremacy have built our lived environment with, then we have to proactively engage with deconditioning our relationship to so-called competition. That is a false idea of success. And the gardens will tell us that, right? We've projected this idea that plants are competing with each other, but more recent science has showed us that they are symbiotically fulfilling each other's ability to thrive. And that's, with specific plants, and that's with lush forests, old growth forests. And so I think that I just don't want to let that moment disappear. And the way that we practice that with each other, not only with the ways that you guys like exchanged and participated in each other's so-called groups, but the way that you reached out to me on the side, the way that I hope I modeled, in the sense that, you know, I'm not going to be, I don't ever want to be the client that you have to, you know, schedule an appointment with through my assistant, and I'm some sort of like reinforce some false hierarchy that I, you know, at the very beginning of this conversation would like to dismantle, because I think that has had, you know, those ideas have landed us into the, you know, mess that we're in now. And I'll finish by saying, you know, I also got an MFA from fucking Stanford University, right? And that if I didn't really have the guidance and the rails of the most remarkable revolutionary elders to push back on the rewards that I was receiving in that position, and the acknowledgments of doing the right thing, I would never be doing work like this with you all, right? And so this deconstructing and undoing was just as valuable, because in the end, I really believe we can't, if we want a more equitable world, which I believe in conversation with all y'all, we do believe that, then we can't let our disciplines discipline us. Yeah. We have to be willing to get our hands dirty, to let the sweat be shared, to have these deep and sometimes uncomfortable conversations. We didn't always agree. And I think that is like, in the spirit of social equity is required. Yeah. I would love to hear what BC Lee has to say about this too.
And I definitely want to hear Brian's thoughts. I just want to jump in real quick and share a note that Ben just sent to me. Just because he's apologizing for having to leave early and be on another review as well. But he just wanted y'all to know that the work today is great. The collaboration looks great. And he says the students seem to get hung up when I mentioned who's your competition. And what I meant by that is, who is an ally that you can put your work in conversation with and evaluate some of the decisions you've made, whether they're technical, aesthetic, budget, etc. And I just want to say that out loud, because I feel like he would have wanted to say that if he was still here. I think we all reacted to the word competition, but that was what he was trying to get at. And I'm glad he said it though, because it's enabled us to have this more like meaty conversation about what we're doing and how and why. And okay, with that, Brian, whatever you go.
Noted. Yeah, this was really, really amazing to see the entire process of you not just dealing with a client or a partner in this particular instance, but the kind of larger ecosystem of people that are going to engage with this particular space, and the multitude of ways in which the space is going to be present in the world. And so kudos to you for going through that process and recognizing the totality of what this work means, not just to the people you're working with, but to yourselves as well, right? It's always a growing experience to go through these things from a design justice perspective. And so I wanted to kind of take one step back and just note that, you know, as we start to think about design justice writ large, there's two kind of base considerations. The first is how do we radically vision spaces for racial, social, cultural justice in throughout our physical environments. And the second one is, how do we challenge existing systems of existing oppressive systems in some capacity, right? Those two things kind of align the core ethos of design justice. And in this, you've done both of them, right? You've found a way to reconsider access for a asset in the community that would historically not be available. And so radically thinking about ways to provide that access to communities that are historically disadvantaged or historically disconnected from this service, I think is extremely important. And so the ability to go through that process is extremely is valuable. The second end of that original statement in terms of radical visioning is that you have to do that through process and outcomes. And so what you've done over the course of the last few months is establish a process, whether it's replicable or not. I think is something that becomes the critique, right? Like, what are the things that prevent this from happening when you go out into the real world, when you work at any of our firms, right? Because the structure and system of a university may not allow this to happen in the real world, but what ways can it, right? What ways can what you've produced be able to carry with you? What processes are you changing as a byproduct of your experience here that can be put into the world? And so anyway, I just wanted to kind of give the kudos there up front, because I haven't spoken a lot today, but I think on the tail end of that, I want to ask just a very, I guess, a simple question that deals specifically with the connection to end users. I think is a huge thing, right? Like at this point in time, you're going to end up basically allowing your baby to hit into the world, and you don't really know what's going to happen. And so I think there's a set of how do you think as a team? How do you think about the knock-on effects of this piece in the world, and how you manage that? What's the post-occupancy report of this project for you that allows you to think about where you can do better, what you can change, what you can start to build on, and how you make that available for the next set of folks, right? Because this is never about just us. It's about how we build systems and build power in our communities. So I want to know how you think about these processes moving forward, and how you can feed back into a system that allows this to be a reoccurring thing and not just a one-off, whether it's for Jackie or for anybody else. That's the question. And I can clarify if there's any need.
Yeah, can you say the question again?
Yeah, how do you think about, again, a post-occupancy report or a post-occupancy vision of this project that exists once it's in use, once it has value in the world that is beyond what you have placed in it? How are you going to go back and understand the assets and the deficits of not just what the outcome is, not just what the product is, but your process? Where in the process, as I think someone mentioned earlier, you messed up, or if you are not precise in the structure at the very early point, it has knock-on effects throughout the entirety of the project. What were those things from a process standpoint that you can go back and start to reconsider and critique and put back in the world in a way that can be, again, make this process a little bit more conducive to the community you're serving?
Yeah, I think me personally, I'm very interested in the sort of behavioral psychological impacts that this project can have on the community and the people using it, which is, I have a psychology background, and it's just kind of really super hard to tie down. But I think post-occupancy evaluations are super important, and for me are super interesting. Like, we all have such like this great vision of what this cart is going to be and how wonderful it's going to be. And I think it's so important to then, go back and talk with the people who have, interacted with the cart. How do they feel about it? What were their takeaways? Like, what we have done better, and then share that with people who have the same sort of mission, and sort of help people to do better the next time, to make it even better, so we reach even more people with our our mission, our statement. Yeah, I find that stuff so interesting and so important, and kind of like forgotten about, because we are just super excited about it and have such high hopes. And so of course we hope that it fulfills all of that.
So I'm gonna make one more suggestion as again, as you start to think about what this looks like in the future for all of your work, again, outside of this one. As you start to think about the production of any end product, what are the, you know, what are the organizing tenets that can happen throughout the process? Because when you build a thing, you're literally able to build power and build community, right? And so, man, what an opportunity to test these things out along the way, and not just from a kind of a prototype standpoint, but what does it mean to actually prototype your engagement or your community involvement, right? Because I think that would also have helped. And again, obviously, we know COVID, we know all of that. So this is just a suggestion for the future: is how do we make sure that in the process of prototyping our outcome or our product, how might we also prototype our engagement? Because people will relate to these buildings and are these spaces in very specific ways, and we can start to learn from that early on and not just after it's produced.
Does anyone want to specifically respond, or should we transition to a little bathroom stretch break? I appreciate those comments, Brian, and I do know as an organization we wrestle with that all the time. And you all you students, if you want to be part of that conversation and like actionable process, then we invite you into our staff discussions, which like Anne and Nick and Jose will let you know, it's a frequent discussion. And we're actually doing, we're consulting with Jean Firth, formerly of GRODAT, to try to like crack that puzzle and do some post-occupancy work across the breadth of projects we've been involved in. Yeah, even in a like project by project basis, really dialing in what are we measuring and how do we get better at all of it. The process and the end result is a constant struggle and like something we all need to deal with. Okay, you guys have been amazing. This conversation's great. I'm reluctant to make this break happen, but I think we all could use it. And then I want to say, as we come back from our 5-minute bathroom break, the next part of the presentation is much briefer than this first part has been. So I think it'll go relatively fast. I don't want to scare any of you critics who are like, when do I get to eat? But I think that's the spirit of this. It's a window into some of the other stuff we've been doing that, like the added bits. So why don't we take a 5-minute break? I'll see y'all at 11:40 as we continue the discussion. And thanks so much for your thoughts so far. This has been great. Okay. I'm so cold from sitting, y'all. Need to go like do some jumping jacks or something.
I just looked outside for the first time today and it's snowing now. So,
wow.
Remind
me where you're at.
Well, I'm currently living with my aunt in Cincinnati.
Okay.
I was going to drive home today to Columbus, but I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. I hate driving in the snow.
I've never driven in snow, so I wouldn't know what that's like.
It's not pleasant.
Snowy in Cleveland.
No, I bet. Cleveland's always worse.
I was just telling Adrian the other day that like 80% of driving school when you grow up in Cleveland is learning how to drive in the snow. Like literally 80%.
My favorite thing in high school was like the first snow of the season when the people who had just gotten their licenses and like hadn't driven in the snow at all, and they would always run into like mailboxes and stuff without fail.
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage here to spin off the road in the snow. Like everybody's done it once.
Oh, look at you two. So cute.
Yes. Jumpsuit energy.
Do you want to do jumping jacks with me?
I had to drive through the snow. So I'm from Georgia, then like moved to Pennsylvania for undergrad. And one year my parents decided to have Thanksgiving in like upstate New York in near Rochester. And I was driving like after all my exams. And so it was like the middle of the night, snowing. And the snow's just coming at you in a way like it looks like you're in that Star Wars, like the beginning, the opening credits where all the stars are coming. You just can't see. And I like call my dad. I'm like, what do I do? Because he's from Illinois. And he's like, just keep going slow. Like you can pull over. I'm like, there's nothing around. Like, oh, it was awful. But I made it, guys.
That area is also really bad because I grew up in northern Pennsylvania, and that Rochester, like lake effect snow, no joke. Yeah. They get like some of the like on the East Coast, they get like some of the worst weather, the worst winters.
Yeah, and I was on the highways where, I mean, there was nothing around. I mean, there were like some Indian reservations with like casinos, but like there was really nowhere to pull off and like stop at a gas station and hang out for a little. I just had to truck through and hope that no one was around me.
Remember that time a year or two ago where it got below freezing here and they closed schools for a week?
Oh, love that.
Oh, that's hilarious. We used to get school canceled because it was below freezing outside and it was too cold in the negatives. So kids couldn't stand at the bus stop. It was too cold for the little kids.
When I lived in Buffalo, you didn't get snow days unless your front door was covered with snow and you couldn't open it.
All right, so back to the topic of the day. We are going to kind of like close out this conversation showing a few of the other projects, mostly the informational guides and the visions for the Ray space, the Resurrection After Exoneration building. And so I think Bhumika is going to show the budget bit because it seemed like a weird thing to tack on at the end of the photos, but now we're just going to weirdly start with that. But we'll talk about that real quick and then switch over to Danelle as she talks about the guides that they've been working on. So take it away, Bhumika. It's also like midnight for her, so she might be sleepy.
Not yet. And I slept in the afternoon just for this.
Oh yeah, Claire's sharing. Sorry, Claire, thanks.
Yeah, and I actually split the PDF in half now so that it should go faster.
Good thinking.
Hopefully.
So as much as we would have loved to spend an unlimited amount of money on the carts, we had a $14,000 maximum budget we had to adhere to. And so since before we began fabrication, we made it a practice to keep track of the budget throughout the semester and model it according to different categories that we're going to spend money on. And we also set caps on each of these categories just to keep ourselves in check with the budget. In the end, the only category that we ended up exceeding our cap on was the milling budget, because we set the cap in the beginning before we decided that our design would include milling and fabrication as such an important factor. Did the screen sharing this?
Yeah, I got disconnected from our call entirely somehow.
So in the end, we did not have to use up any of our contingency budget, and we have a good amount of flexibility to print out more educational materials after the studio concludes to hand out with the cards. And so if you go to the next slide, this is the breakdown of how we spent all the budget. Most of it went into framing, cladding, and hardware on the cards. And then the course material actually includes all the experimentation we did throughout the semester to acquire different skills that enabled us to do this project. And then milling and finishes. Although a lot of the course materials budget is being taken up with the jumpsuits that we got made. So yeah, that's it for the budget. That's it for the budget. If you have any specific questions about it right now, I can address it. I have the spreadsheet pulled up right beside me.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Great. I definitely want to speak about the budget briefly, and then I do have to go. So I have a closing remark as well, but I love that you said that, not because it happened, but because that is the reality of all design build. Everything always becomes more expensive. And this is why I have so much respect for the small center and these kinds of community projects, because y'all are getting a really amazing firsthand experience before you enter the professional world to understand the value in designing within your parameters. And one of those parameters is budget. A lot of times the budget is developed by someone who doesn't understand the full breadth of the project and its development through its life cycles, from ideation and concept to design to full CD sets up to fabrication, installation, delivery, all of that stuff. Developing budgets accordingly is an incredibly prolific skill that will make you a better designer and will make you a more conscious contributor to your environments that you're building within. I have maybe out of the couple hundred projects I've worked on, maybe only 4 or 5 were ever appropriately budgeted. So it is a skill, and it is something that is utterly invaluable, especially when that comes down to equity. A lot of people look at equity in design after the end product. Not many people are looking at it through the development of that product and that project. Where is the equity falling when you have a certain budget to mill lumber, for example, and you can't afford to go with a local resource and you might have to outsource somewhere? What does it look like literally for the people milling that lumber or the people forming that aluminum? What do their work conditions look like? What do their circumstances look like? So equity isn't only happening, or the lens for the equity should not only be applied after the fact, it should be applied throughout the process as well. So this is something that I chose in my career to focus predominantly on the environment and sustainability in design. But obviously, social justice and equity has been something very important to me, and I'm starting to learn much more about it now. But in terms of the equity, the social justice lens and equity lens within a design project, you really need to look at it from start to finish, not just what happens after the project itself has been completed. So that's another really important and powerful part of budgeting accordingly and budgeting intentionally. Again, I'm sorry I have to leave, but I wanted to get that out there because I do think that that's a very valuable thing for designers and architects to understand, so that they have a full range of understanding of the people involved in the process and the equity within that process from start to finish. Lastly, I will just say it's been a really great pleasure to work with y'all on this. I wish I was even more involved. Jackie is a good friend, and I look up to her for a lot of things, and I know she's very appreciative of all of y'all for what you've done on this project. And again, I'll reiterate that the end result was really wonderful, and I think y'all did a great job. The last thing I'm gonna leave y'all with, I think that you guys all need to be, or you all, excuse me, should be learning from this experience in a very prolific way, and you should be taking the words from Jackie and from Brian and from everyone else very seriously, because there's no more room in the design build world for people who want to go work on big budget office renovation. It's not what you should be focusing on. These kinds of projects are the future of design build. They're the future of architecture, and it's what we need the most right now in the industry. So I hope that this lesson, and I think one of you spoke to this earlier after Ben posed his question about competition, but let this push you in the right direction within your careers. And of course, it might not work for everybody, but keep fighting for that and keep trying, because that's really what it boils down to. Nobody on this call, including myself, and I've done peanuts compared to folks like Jackie and Brian. But even myself, I look back and I could have taken more profitable avenues. I could have taken more lifestyle avenues. We could have gone down a lot of different roads that would have maybe been more financially lucrative. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to go to sleep at night knowing that your work is either impactful or it isn't. And I hope that this at large was a lesson for all of y'all to take really close to home and to process while you guys move forward in your careers. So with that, I appreciate everyone very much, and I hope to be involved in another project like this in the future. And again, very, very good job, y'all.
Thank you so much for being here and all the time you gifted us and your input. Obviously, some of your ideas, the gratitude manifested in the way the cart functioned and the materials it used, but also, like you said, in the deep-seated moments where we're thinking about social equity and racial justice. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much.
Hi, Mike. All right, let's keep going.
Also, shout out to Skatelight for donating material to us. They donated 4 sheets of the material to us for free, and we just had to pay for the shipping costs.
Okay. Something that came pretty apparent to us early on is that we wanted to have this action advocacy component added to the cart that we've been speaking about kind of this entire time. Our initial ideas were brainstormed in the first stages of designing the carts. We started this brainstorming process by being very prescriptive with the program on certain elements of the cart. And this is first initially kind of sketched out in this blue page on the left side of this slide. So for example, in the version of the cart on the left, we called this like flip out countertop, the 5 actions to advocacy counter, where you are encouraged to write to 2 people in public office, donate money to the cause, take home an educational book, write to a prison inmate, get the tools to start a conversation with others about mass incarceration. So we then started doing more research in ways in which we could get the community directly involved in this advocacy component, kind of empowering them to choose their next step, what their next step looks like in ending mass incarceration. So in our research, we came across the Center for Urban Pedagogy's guides, which they expertly use graphics to disseminate information and empower a community to advocate for themselves. And these are a couple examples on this slide. One of them was like, I got arrested, now what? A guide to the juvenile justice system, get it back, how to get your stuff back after you've been arrested. So these were kind of the things that were kind of inspiring to us as we were trying to figure out how to add this component into the carts. And you can go to the next slide, Claire. As we're waiting, this led us to the decision to make pamphlets for the carts as our action advocacy component. So then in our initial stages, we started writing down our goals. We really wanted these pamphlets to be desirable and shareable. Like, we wanted to attract people to the cart with this sort of messaging that we wanted to bring to it. So some of our goals were, to make information more accessible through infographics. We wanted them to live on the carts as an easy way to disseminate information for advocacy and resources. We wanted to use graphic design as a tool for equipping the community with resources to self-advocate. We wanted to explain the mission and purpose of these carts. We wanted to demystify public policy. We wanted to start conversations, and we wanted to educate the community on mass incarceration and prison abolition, along with herbal medicine and the work that Solitary Gardens does. You can go to the next one.
I haven't introduced myself yet, so you met Dana and you met Danielle, and now we're going to make it even more confusing with Danelle. So just do a lovely tongue twister there. After defining the goals of our infographic advocacy, like Adrienne just talked about, we came to the decision that it made the most sense to make two separate pamphlets. One pamphlet in a zine style that could live on the cart and be centered around the mission of the Apothecart, and the second pamphlet in a more traditional brochure size that would act as a resource for the cart, focused on connecting people to community programs. And the second one would live on the cart, but not be bound to just that one organization of the apothecary.
Okay, so with our first pamphlet, we wanted to take the more informational route and introduce people to the idea of prison abolition and how it relates to Jackie's work, the carts, and all of that. For this pamphlet, we focus on continuing the plant symbolism that is used in Jackie's work to educate the community about the importance of prison abolition and the small steps that each of us can take to get there in our daily lives. You can go to the next slide.
Moving back to the second pamphlet, our first task was to find a community partner that had a similar focus to us and would be interested in working together. Our initial goals were using graphic advocacy to make policy public, start conversations, and or create awareness. And we started by forming a list of New Orleans organizations we thought met that criteria, and we reached out to a few, and we heard back from the first 72 plus, which is our community partner for our second pamphlet. So to give you a brief introduction, they provide resources and transitional housing to formerly incarcerated people. Their goal is to stop the barriers prior incarceration leads to in rejoining the workforce and the world. And their mission is to stop the cycle of incarceration by fostering independence, self-sustainability through education, stable and secure housing and employment, healthcare, and community engagement. And Claire, you can go to the next slide. And we were talking directly with the co-director, Kelly, for our collaboration. Okay, great. For our work, Kelly was interested in reworking this pamphlet, which is currently used to get donor interest and explain the organization from that lens. The first MD2 Plus wanted to make a new pamphlet that was more grassroots oriented and more readable to someone who was interested in using the services, and in general give like a fresh coat of paint to a outdated pamphlet, because their organization has like really shifted, you know, as the years have gone by. Okay, great. So currently we are in the later design stage with this new pamphlet. There are some content decisions that we are like currently making with Kelly, and we are exploring graphic options with the goal of being like really eye-catching and clear in our mission. This version of the pamphlet is presented chronologically, so it's easier to read online, but there's also a printed version that would be in a foldable brochure format. And some important things are we added new sections like the FAQ and the testimonials to be more informative to people interested in their organization. And this pamphlet would live on the cart as a resource in the first 72 Plus organization, and it would be printed in Louisiana prisons as an, you know, further resource. Oh yeah, and then since we're in progress, I just wanted to include these pictures of a test print we did, testing legibility and color. Our goal is to make something engaging and easy to understand, but we still have a ways to go. So this is the progress we've made so far with that, and our goal is to finish in the next week or two.
So one of the side projects we worked on in a team of three with me, Rebecca, and Jeremy was trying to make an initial schematic design for the Ray building, which is located on St. Bernard Avenue. And so I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the project and the process that we used. So Ray's mission is to promote and sustain a network of support among the formerly incarcerated, reconnecting them to the community. And so this space will house the Apothecafe and shop, which will sell coffee and teas and tinctures that the proceeds from which will go into supporting Ray and its programming. It'll also house Samara School of Herbalism, a merchandise room, and some office spaces and a clinical room. And so all of these different organizations are going to take up space in this building, and we started out trying to lay out plans on how to program them and lay them out most efficiently so that the organizations can work together. We started with a site visit to the building. They can see the front facade here and a picture of what it looks like inside towards the back end of the space. Here are some more pictures. There's a barbershop in the front end of the space that is elevated by 18 inches. And so this is more, what we worked on was more of a schematic plan so that they can go through with the first phase of development with an allotted budget of around $60,000. And we were really grateful to have Nick Janish as a resource, because the small center previously worked on designs for this space. And so they had a lot of input for us to use about the plumbing in the space or the structural systems in there. And so we looked at some precedents throughout the process to really understand how small cafes can be laid out and how the space can be used more efficiently, what tools are used to connect the space better with material choices, and even small things that really make a lot of difference. Like, for example, with COVID, the operable window here is something that we took into our plans, so that it would be more efficient for people to visit the space. And so we looked at some more examples of tiny cafes and really studied the plans and proportions to even place furniture into the space. As you can see in this one, this is a linear space, just like the one we had to design, and the shelving units and display options is something we again thought of, because just like the Apothecarts, the race space is supposed to promote education and conversation. And then the next step we took was to study the existing space and its floor plan with some diagrams. So this is a plan of the existing floor plans. You can see all the existing walls. There weren't, there's only one way of circulating, and there were a lot of walls that we in the end had to break down or cut through, but this represents what already exists in the space. We also, in the beginning, we laid out different programs in the space, throughout the space, in very diagrammatic, basic ways, so that we could communicate them with Jackie and Jen and get feedback from them. Because as we were working on designing the space, they were also simultaneously working on what the space would look like in their mind and how they would use it. And so it was a really collaborative process between us, and that was very helpful throughout the process. And this is a light diagram of the space. As you can see, the barber shop in the front has most of the light coming in, and in the back, there isn't much natural light. So all these diagrams really helped us on the things that we needed to focus on in design, especially in this first stage, to think about what is essential and what is a priority. Like, for example, light is probably going to be one of the most important things to do. And I'll pass it on to Rebecca to talk about the project a little more.
Yeah, so after like several meetings with Jackie, Emily, Nick, and like our group, we had like a few goals that kind of helped us arrive at one final layout. So like Bhumika mentioned, we did several iterations of different layouts, kind of what we thought worked best for the space as is, working with like real world constraints of like a budget. How do we liven this space? Like, as you saw in the light diagram, like that backspace is like pretty dark, and how do we kind of like add light and add life to this? Jackie always mentioned that like we want adaptability and flexibility in this space. There's a lot of programmatic elements happening. And so we worked really hard to kind of like incorporate all of those in a way that could change because of like budget constraints and like timelines and things. We wanted to focus on a quick renovation that doesn't have to necessarily be permanent, but can be. And so that's kind of like things that we kept in mind. And then also, because we were building these carts adjacent to proposing these renovations, we wanted to have like a similar language with materiality and color. And like Bhumika said, also like the space as well as the carts, like our spaces for conversation. And I don't know if y'all could hear that bird, I'm sorry. Spaces for conversation and like herbal medicine and like the work that they do and like the Samara school. And then also we wanted to explore materiality and how we can kind of communicate different messages through what we do in this space. And then additionally, we had a walkthrough with a contractor, one of Jackie's friends, to go over like what our proposal would look like in this space. And so here, taking all of that in is a programmatic diagram of the proposal. And so in that light green all the way to the, in that light green all the way to the right is the Apothecafe, and we wanted that to take up the most space within like this building. And so we have like the St. Bernard entrance and the storefront kind of like facing and getting most of that light and that sidewalk energy and like traffic flow. And then in that like light wine colored is the consultation room. One thing Jackie mentioned is that there's not a lot of like opportunities for people who need to rent an office space to do so. And so having this consultation room, people can rent it and it can be on like a rotating schedule, and it'll be kind of adaptable to whatever kind of needs they have. You can think of it as like a clinic space or like counseling space, things like that. So that's kind of what we kept in mind. And we wanted to keep it tucked away more for like privacy. And then some seating for the Apothecafe can act as like a waiting room for that space as well. And then in that like light yellow space is the mixed use, the Samara School of Community Herbalism can have their classrooms set up there. There could be like events happening, like talks, discussions. So it's very adaptable up to like whatever needs to happen there. And then in the back, the yellow green color is like the outdoor space. They can have gardens happening, herbal prep work, like outdoor classrooms with COVID and everything. We've seen the rise of like the importance of outdoor meeting spaces. And so they have a really awesome backyard area. So that works well for them. Oh, I forgot to do my reaction. So in this diagram, one thing that we talked about early on was that the space as is had a very like one way of circulation. And so by opening it up more and creating that like linear orientation, there's like one main circulation, but it breaks off into different like spaces. So you have like entrance to the front, entrance to the back, but you can break off into the different spaces depending on what you're there for or what you came to do in that space. And then finally, a diagram for the height, because like Bhumika mentioned, there's an 18-inch difference in elevation. We decided to kind of build up that front space and increase the Apothecafe area, but there is going to be a ramp for accessibility. So that way the space has like a language between the two heights, but it's still accessible to everyone. And then the bar to the Apothecafe wraps around into the main space. So it's not like the Apothecafe is separate from the mixed use space. And so here's just like the final technical plan with like dimensions if you want reference or anything. But we just felt that this kind of incorporated all of those programmatic elements that needed to happen, as well as some of those goals that I mentioned earlier, like livening the space, opening it up. Like this is a place for conversation, but there's also a place for like privacy and consultation. So yeah, this is what we've been working with.
So these sections just show the nature of the space and how it flows through. So as you enter it in the front, you can see that it's the Apothecafe counter and it is on the concrete slab. And then you can see the ramp going down and towards the back space with Samara and the partition in the middle to allow for some privacy between these two spaces. Also, something important to highlight in the sections was the ceiling conditions in the space that were an important consideration in design, because there's a lot of interest and a lot of dips in the ceiling height. And we came up with different strategies we discussed different strategies like putting in a drop ceiling, but in the end, we suggested that it should be painted a single color just because of the budget and the feel of this space. And this is another view looking towards the counters and a consultation room on the left. And this shows one of the dividers that we suggested that would exist between the Samara space and the Apothecafe space. A lot of the designs shown in the schematic plans aren't prescriptive, but they're a way of identifying the important points in the current space and suggesting potential solutions to those problems.
So these are some atmospheric renders of the interior of what Ray would look like. And so this is a view from the front entry. And so you come upon the cafe and the retail space. And so just to kind of fit all of the design elements within the budget, instead of doing very large scale like renovations, we decided that adding this interior design trend of color blocking would kind of enhance the space and kind of organize the programmatic applications. And so yellow is just like a very friendly color that invites you in, and thinking that it was a nice color for the cafe because yellow also subconsciously makes you hungrier as well as thirsty. And so that might invite people to come and buy more of the teas, coffees, tinctures, and the light bites. And then also a cooler color on the other side, blue, is a little more serious and slows down your eye. And so within all the merchandise, it kind of gives you a good time to reflect on the messages that's on these things that you can buy. So shirts that may say imagine a landscape without prisons, or really looking into where these tinctures teas are coming from, which are the incarcerated peoples. Next one. And so as you slip through the arched pathway, you traverse the ramp. And so the yellow kind of blends into this orange color, which is a little bit brighter, a little bit more friendlier, and it's an extension of the Apothecafe. But it also acts, this color also enhances the space to make it act as more of a engaging room where people can talk and listen and share in this like fun, safe space. Next. And then lastly, as you move towards the back, you encounter the Samara School of Herbalism. And so it goes into this darker yellow, orange color that gets more exciting and a little bit more hands-on, and you're actually focused on how all these herbs kind of are integrated in your life in the city, and reflects back on all of the kind of weeds that are thought of to be bad, but are actually good for you. And then how that's an allegory for all of the incarcerated peoples that are perceived to be bad, but can effectively help the community. And so these are just, these are all the renders. Thank you.
Yeah, and to finish off here, we wanted to circle back around and talk a little bit about like questions that had been on our mind and like themes that had been on our mind throughout the process. And we've already kind of talked about some of this stuff, but just to reiterate some of these ideas to spark some conversations, these questions are, what would an aggregation or fleet of these carts look like? What role can design play in dismantling the prison industrial complex? How can design spread awareness? How can advocacy be more evident or worked into the cart design? And how does design create a space for conversation? Yeah, and thank you to everybody for listening to us. Nice finishing picture here from our picture day, but yeah. yeah, I believe that's all we have.
Hooray.
Congratulations, team.
Yeah, big ups, you guys. Is amazing. I just want to add for some of the folks who weren't part of the conversation, the Apothe Cafe at Ray also is a nod to JT John Thompson, one of my elders who I know Brian knew him pretty well, but you know, was 14 years on death row, 8 days of execution, was very much organized around prosecutorial misconduct as a further injustice of the criminal punishment system. And so to uphold his life and legacy, that space will be activated as a diversion program and also a place where returning citizens will be employed. Employed, educated, and trained, not only in the space and through Samara School of Community Herbalism, but in all of our community partners and growers. And so the literal growing of plants and plant medicine designed by currently incarcerated folks will be harvested and processed by returning citizens to produce the teas, and tinctures and salves that will be sold to the general public as a way to sustain it and to allow ourselves to not be dependent on the nonprofit industrial complex. So just in terms of like design considerations and like big picture intentions is also collaborations and outfitting the upstairs to be activated as offices for social workers and other services for returning citizens. And big picture, WHIV might actually end up inhabiting a radio station committed to social justice, might end up being part of the upstairs. And also doing, so that way we could have returning citizens creating podcasts and radio programs and doing radio journalism, et cetera, as like major picture stuff. Ah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's so amazing. It's so amazing. Okay.
I think too, the one of the benefits of the small scale design build was that we could pursue these other like related design projects. And while they're just kind of like early stages and works in progress, it's been sort of nice to be able, one of the questions that always comes up in these final reviews is like, okay, great, you did an object, but it's kind of a one-off, like now what? Or like, what's the larger impact or vision or whatever? And in this sense, we've been able to think about those things and sort of take that next step towards, okay, now you made a cool cart, but like, what's the bigger vision or impact, or how does this set a design agenda that can be expanded on? And so, I don't know, that's not so much a point as just a thing to say. And yeah, we'd welcome any thoughts about these works in progress.
Yeah, I'm like astonished at the output here and the level of creativity and collaboration that must have gone into creating these works. It's really remarkable. And I think that one of the ways to kind of think about, one of the things that I found useful in thinking about design, and especially kind of approaching something as massive and seemingly intractable as the prison industrial complex, is thinking about scale and replicability, and when you kind of want to thwart scale or not scale certain things. And I think that I tend to think of Jackie's project as an anti-plantation in its design. I'm kind of drawing on the work of Anna Tsing's Mushroom at the End of the World, where she talks about that history of the easy replicability of the plantation into the early factories, into the incarceration model, corporations, and how these really structure capitalism as we know it. And she has this wonderful book on the matusaki mushrooms, which are kind of a highly valued mushroom that thrives and grows off of forests that have been that are now deforested areas, and the mushrooms are helping bring back the trees. And these mushrooms, you have to forage them, right? You can't cultivate them, you can't scale them up. They won't scale up. So it's this highly valued commodity, but it won't scale up and cooperate with the capitalist system in the way that some folks would like it to. And so I like to think about the kind of aspects of Jackie's project and of Solitary Gardens that refuse scale in that way. And so I think that, playing with these elements of flexibility, of improvisation, of impermanence, and permanence, like that dynamic there. And when you want to scale and when you maybe want to make it more difficult for folks to scale, are things to be thoughtful about in the design process. And I would just go back to, one of Brian's earlier comments, which was about, what's the social prototype here? There's this like tangible, beautiful things that you all have designed and built. And I would think more, I would invite you to think more about the social relationships that made that possible, and to even think about these kinds of relationships to the material. So not just the relationships among you and between humans, and I love the kind of humanity that you've brought to the piece, but also relationships to plants as you designed this piece, your relationship to the other materials that you use during the fabrication process, like thinking about those relationships and reflecting on those, because those might be the kinds of things that you want to scale as you move forward in your careers, as you move forward in your work, and to place the emphasis in those relationships as opposed to how quickly things can be replicated and scaled up. So anyways, thank you for having me here. This is, I'm entering your world as an anthropologist and not with all of the kind of expertise that some of the other panelists have, but I've really enjoyed hearing about your work, and I'll have to head out in about 4 minutes here because I've got another meeting coming up, but I just wanted to say thank you again, Jackie and Emily and all of you for having me here. And also I'm just floored by the creations that you made this semester. So well done.
I'd like
Can I
to.
say something?
Oh, sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to reply to you. So I really appreciate everything that you said and our connection with the materials and how we can emulate the language of Solitary Gardens in our project. And that's definitely something we need to work on more. But something really interesting that came up through this project, which connected all the way back to our volunteer day, when we made these beds with limestone and other local materials, was that we started thinking about how to emulate that language in the way in which we construct the counters and the ramps. And so we're still in talks of coming up with a process where you use the Adobe brick style to construct panels that can go onto the counter. So throughout this entire project, it was really interesting how things connected and the collaboration that took.
I wanted to also just add to what Anna was saying earlier about the great work that everybody has done, and to think about the next steps. One thing that I would like to encourage all of you is that as designers, what you bring to the table is the ability to imagine things. It's actually hard for a lot of people to think sometimes of what are the possibilities could be. And as designers, you do have that ability. And so I think what you could also then think about in the next step is that then you could help people imagine how to use these cards and how to use the spaces like the for Ray, what are the possibilities? So for example, thinking about the multi-purpose space in terms of how it could be used for the school, how it could be used for, let's say, an event like, you know, a mini concert or something, and then how the outdoor space could be used for different functions and programs. So I think that's something that you can then try to show the different possibilities. Like, you know, what would it look like if it is an event space? Like, what would it look like if it's a school? Show the different layouts, show the furniture, how it's being related, show how the carts could possibly go in. In the same way, you could also look at showing, let's say, how the carts, you know, is it like as the question was posed at the end, you know, what could the fleet of carts look like? So you can show perspective drawings, show layouts, you know, how could this be in this park? How could this be with Ray? How could this be with, so you show different possibilities to really show people that it could work, you know, and you're trying to imagine it for them, how it could work. And so that's something I know you're not supposed to do now, right? But that's something that you could easily add also later on, showing all of these different possibilities. Because yes, you definitely need to have room for improvisation. You also need to have room for flexibility. But that's your role also, is to then let like imagine what those different possibilities are and show it to people, like how it could work. Because it's hard sometimes for people to imagine the cart seeing as a final product, but then you show them, okay, this is like how it would look like in different situations and different events. So again, that's something that you could add later on. But that's definitely, I think, part of your skill, is to be able to imagine future possibilities. So again, congratulations. You know, it's such an impressive work, all of you, and the collaboration and the co-creation is just fantastic. So again, I commend all of you for such a great work and output. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm gonna just try to keep this brief, but this was really incredible to see. I think it's a good launch point for your efforts as design justice practitioners as you move forward, should you choose that as a direction in your work. There are more and more projects, more and more firms who are doing this work at a large scale. So the ability to understand, I think Benjamin spoke a little bit about this, but to put a finer point on it, what is the difference between architecture and the purpose of architecture? Right, and those sometimes are wildly different things. And so thinking about the purpose of architecture as a means for us to kind of shelter our physical selves, but our spirit, our souls, our narratives, and the scale of that for time immemorial. We've sheltered our physical selves, our spirits, and our narratives at wildly different scales. Whether it's tablets or writings on the walls, or caves, or mansions, or cathedrals, or sheds, or tents. I mean, like, we've done this at so many different scales, and we should acknowledge those all as architectural considerations, and not just simply narrow our view to understand architecture as one singular thing. And then beyond that, recognizing that our skill set as designers, and this process that you're going through as designers, allows you to impact, what we call the 6 Ps, but pedagogy, policies, procedures, practice, projects, and people. Your ability to take your design intuition and the idea of building power and building community to challenge any of those particular categories gives you a leg up, and an opportunity to change systems in ways that other people will not have the ability to see. And so it is part of our job and our duty as you know, as citizens, as residents, as community members, to be in this fight and to care for one another through the work and the skill set that we have. And you have proven through this work that you're capable of doing that. Now it's just a matter of how you choose to take it forward. So congratulations again on doing so, and can't wait to see you out in the field.
All right, well, that seems like a natural conclusion point, unless anybody else has anything they want to say. Speak now or forever go away in Zoom. Well, this has been an incredible semester, and I love that this is the discussion that concluded it, because I feel like y'all have brought up some great points, and like really, it's almost been a return back to some of the early conversations in the semester that sometimes you lose sight of in the chaos of just making the thing. And it's so good to have space to just reflect and think and remember what it was that you were trying to do in the first place. And yeah, this has just been a real gift to have this conversation. So thanks to all of you. Gosh, next steps. I hope that student team, let's stay on and discuss for a minute, but I hope that everyone's able to get a little bit of rest and recovery in, and that also, I just want to say we're working out the details, but I think that on Friday the 4th, we're going to have some sort of shorter format celebration of the project where people can either Zoom in if they're out of town or stop by if they're in town to sort of check out the work and the project, and maybe have a beverage like a hot chocolate if it's terribly cold. And so that's what's next right now for this project. And then Jackie, I know we'll be talking to you lots more, but we all know that all of these people want to know how it goes and how the projects are doing out in the world, and how how we can continue to be a part of the work that you've been doing, and whether that's promoting it or attending things or just checking in on you every now and again to see what's happening.
Yes, thank you for saying that. You know, bribery is one of the thoughts that I had in my mind of like how to keep you guys close to me. And so I already started making little gifts for everyone. So if you can't make it on Friday, is cool. You know, I'll leave them with Nick or Emily, and then next semester you can come pick them up. But also in you know, I've said this maybe even part of this conversation, that I do believe this work of abolition begins with eye contact, and that actually when I saw my now friend and you know, great inspiration, Angela Davis, asked the same question. She said, you know, the first step of abolition is building community. And I feel like that's the most important thing that we did here. Yes, we fucking made some dope ass carts. What you did was incredible. Yes, we've laid the plans for a future center that is also organized around abolition, but we also are friends now. And we've built community that I hope you feel like you can come to me at any point in time if there's some relative question. You know, relative to community transgressions and accountability, but also herbal care, or maybe you're just having a shit week and you want to work it out in the gardens. That is always open and available to you. And for me, that is arguably the most important outcome of this collaboration. And I can't thank you enough. My big fear, and I'll just say this why I have your attention, is the opposite of what you said, Emily. And I was afraid that, like, you know, traditional education, semester's over, peace out, I now have calculus I have to focus on. And I'm like, well, how am I going to keep them surrounding me besides bribing them with teas and tinctures, you know? And so I hope just a little spark of excitement and curiosity and wonder is enough to keep our orbits very close to each other. Yeah.
Definitely, you're not getting rid of us.
And we are easily bribed.
Awesome.
Oreos are not herbal medicine, but they work well.
What's that?
Oreos are not herbal medicine, but they work really well.
And we seem to have a love for jumpsuits, so.
Yeah, I mean, we are the Apothic crew now, a fish. Yeah, how many people, show of hands, feel like they can make it IRL masked up outside on Friday?
What time is that? I mean, I don't know.
4.
This, but okay.
Okay, awesome. Perfect.
I don't want to put Anna on the spot, but Anna, do you want to share the latest update you got during our review of the patches that go on the jumpsuits?
Yes, they sent a little sample JPEG. I can email. I don't think I can put it in Zoom, but they said it'll probably be done by the end of this week. So maybe that will add to Jackie's bribery gift.
We have to show this. Let's see here.
Anna, can you share screen?
Can you guys see that patch?
Oh, that looks great.
Ooh.
So good. Beautiful.
Needle and threads out, people. They're coming your way by mail.
So cool. Yeah, the big debate was whether or not we embroider Apothecrew on the jumpsuits or go with that design, and I'm glad we went with that design. It's rad. It's really rad. And if all goes well, I think some of you follow me on the Instagram, and you know that Chopper, one of the folks, the solitary gardeners that I've worked with since this project began, came home and got to visit his gardens, and I invited him to come Friday. So he's gonna try, there's all of this parole orientation that he has to complete, but he said he's gonna try to come on Friday and meet the carts in person. So it'd also be extra special. Yeah, and he has a jumpsuit right now, so it's cool.
We ordered one extra and Chopper got it.
The 3XL.
Yeah. One for backups. Hey, I guess that's it. Are we good?
I think we're good.
One last high five. Hooray over Zoom.
All right, y'all. Well done.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you
Love all of you. Thank you for everything.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Bye-bye. Kiddos, stay around. Or students.
Young people. Bye, y'all. I will see you Friday.
All right. Bye-bye.
Let
me stop our